Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto has perfect memories of the next 15 years part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto awoke, screaming. Quickly, he made sure that he was whole and intact. Just a dream, okay? Okay, no, not okay. He was decidedly smaller than when he last remembered. He looked around, taking in everything. He was not in the Hokage tower. He was not lying in bed next to the love of his life. He was in a small, two-room apartment that looked awfully familiar. In a flash, Naruto was out of bed and in the bathroom, desperate to examine himself, to make sure that this was just a bad dream. The face that stared back at him from out of the mirror was that of a 10-year-old blonde shinobi in training, one with ambitions that were the source of ridicule amongst others, not just in his age group. The whisker marks that had adorned his face since before he remembered, normally shrunk behind an insincere mask of laughter, were now drawn tight in an expression of utter disbelief. Uzumaki Naruto, the 6th Hokage, last of the Jinchuriki and keeper of Myoboku Mountain sage techniques, screamed inside his now 10-year-old body. What the hell happened to me? I'm 10 again? I'm back in my old apartment, and I'm 10. I'm not even a genin. He paused. He drew breath. He went through the exercises for calming the mind that had been taught to him by Yamato Tenzu. His name's not important. Wait, if I'm 10 again, then did any of that ever happen? How am I remembering stuff that hasn't happened? Gaara Akatsuki, Danzo, technically, none of that has happened, but I remember it. So he frowned. Trying to puzzle something out, while never his strong suit, was certainly something he'd become better at. His innate stubbornness meant that he never stopped thinking about something until he figured it out. But temporal mechanics was not something he was equipped to deal with, nor was advanced psychology, he mused. It was entirely possible he was just going crazy. Alright. Let's see, last thing I remember was the Chunin exams in Sunagakure. I was there as Gaara's guest of honor for the final matches. Then some kind of attack, Naruto hummed. If he was the sole target, he'd go bananas trying to work out the ramifications of his conscious self being sent back some 15 years. Wow. Seemed like a lot longer. Focus. Would this have any paradoxical effect? If this was really happening, why didn't he remember this? If he didn't, then could this all just be an illusion? Naruto groaned and facepalmed. Genjutsu. It was the only option that made any sense, and really, why hadn't he thought of it sooner? He was the Hokage. For Kami's sake, carefully, he brought his chakra flow to a halt, letting it build up in his inner coils. Then, he forced it through his entire body, 6 times as much chakra as would normally flow suddenly surging through his chakra circulatory system. Considering how much chakra flowed out of his coils normally, he was confident that any genjutsu on him would have been easily disrupted. A small cloud of dust rippled across the floor from the chakra surge. Naruto opened his eyes, frowning. Okay. Not a genjutsu. There was another problem. He hadn't really noticed earlier in his panic, but his movement was more awkward. It lacked the confident, steady grace he had gained from years of intensive taijutsu training, and his inner coils felt cold? No, that was the wrong word. They were less cooperative, he supposed. He facepalmed again. Of course that was the case. Muscle and coil memory wouldn't carry over with actual memories. This body had never performed the hours of grueling taijutsu kata and chakra control exercises, so it wasn't going to retain any of that experience. Assuming that he really had ended up back in his 10-year-old body, and he wasn't just going crazy. But was there any way to make sure? Maybe find out if someone else had been affected. Or was there some kind of future knowledge he could use to prove or disprove his memories? Right, yes. If he could perform a technique from his future? Present? What the hell were you supposed to call the time period you come from and probably can't get back to? Anyway, if he could perform a technique from that time, then he wasn't crazy. He had a knack for pulling impossible victories out of his ass. But he'd never be able to just dream up ninjutsu that actually worked. What to use, it would have to be something that didn't require the chakra control he had lost, so the Rasengan and Rasen Shuriken were out. He doubted he'd be able to use any of his futon techniques either, since, again, this body didn't have the necessary training to perform chakra nature manipulation. His fist struck his palm as if to say, Eureka, Kawarimi no Jutsu. It was a simple, academy-taught technique, and more to the point, he wouldn't learn it until he was 11. So, if he could perform a Kawarimi, then he wasn't going crazy, and his 25-year-old mind really had been spirited back in time to inhabit his 10-year-old body. He was the one experiencing it, and even he thought it sounded crazy. Yash. I'm either crazy or just in big trouble. Here goes. Moment of truth. His hands went through the seals for the Kawarimi no Jutsu. He molded what felt like the appropriate amount of chakra, chose the object he would substitute with, and he substituted with the fold-up chair next to his bathroom. Naruto exhaled, immensely grateful that he wasn't going crazy. No, he was just really screwed. Now that the immediate danger of insanity was removed, he felt really tired. He moved the chair back to where it was, and crawled back into bed. He'd sort the rest of this out in the morning. Yawning, Naruto awoke, and looked to his left, expecting to see his wife sleeping peacefully, and the feeling that everything was right with the world that sight would bring. Then he remembered what had happened the previous night. So, not just a bad dream. Frowning again, he leaned forward, adopting his cross-legged thinking pose. If he could just remember more of what happened at the Sanagekyo Chunin exams, in the Kage's box. Right. That's where he'd been sitting along with the Kazekage, Gaara. With Gaara was who else was with him? Temari. Naruto grinned triumphantly as, after the initial breakthrough, more and more fragments started falling into place. Temari had been standing behind Gaara and slightly to the left, there as his honor guard. Naruto, as Hokage, had brought Shikamaru, then a special Jounin, as an honor guard, and he was standing behind Naruto and to the right. Next to Temari. He chuckled at that. Sitting on Naruto's left, and there in her capacity as his wife, and Hyuga clan head, was the wonderful Hinata. How could he have ever forgotten about her presence? He shook his head. He'd beat himself up later. What had happened next was fuzzy. There was a surprise attack. Some kind of obscuring mist surrounded the Kage's box, and a huge wave of chakra and killing intent. Naruto cursed. He couldn't remember what had attacked. It was an attack, of that he was certain, but he was also certain that the last attack, that he could remember, had caught everyone in the Kage's box. Naruto swallowed. Had he died back then, in the Kage's box? Had everyone in the box died? The Hokage and Kazekage, their villages well known to be close allies. If both of them were killed at the same time, along with their respective liaison officers, Konoha and Suna would be simultaneously leaderless, and have lost two powerful bonds. Naruto and Gaara were as brothers, and Temari and Shikamaru well. Baki was intelligent and influential enough that he could probably keep control of Suna in the interim, and Tsunade would likely be forced back into office, but their two villages would still be hurting from the loss of their leaders. Regardless of the progress towards peace that had been made in recent years, the political climate was still untenable. A sudden weakness like losing their most popular and skilled leaders in a decade was a considerable weakness, and not one that any war hawks would be able to pass up. That said though, any war against Konoha or Suna would force the other's hand, and the Konoha-Suna alliance would dominate that part of the continent easily. With Rain Country boxed in on three sides, Amigekyo would side with whoever posed the greatest threat as an enemy, despite their xenophobic foreign policy. That, in turn, would determine the balance of power amongst the other, smaller villages, due to Amigekyo's central location. Earth Country and Iwabakure would end up boxed in to the northwest, with any aggressive actions swiftly repelled. Naruto doubted that the new Tsuchikage was stupid enough to try such a thing. Kiri, though, was highly militarized, even by the standards of a ninja village, and had been involved in every war in the great nation's history since its founding. Would they try anything? That was unlikely. Naruto had met the Mizukage, and she was generally lackadaisical regarding diplomacy with the mainland. Understandable, considering Kiri's remote location and monopoly over island nations and sea-based protection. If war did break out on the mainland though, Kiri would become involved as a destabilizing factor, antagonizing either everyone or whichever side they thought was more powerful. This was due as much to strategy as it was pride. Kirigaku's ninja had always been proud warriors, and would seek to prove their superiority by aligning themselves against the most powerful opponents they could. That this strategy allowed them to ensure that the war would be costly enough that no mainland power could threaten Water Country afterwards was only prudent justification. Kumo, though Naruto cringed. It was no secret that of all the ninja villages, Kumogakure had made the most progress in preparing for war, having started amassing resources and ninjutsu since the Third War had ended. The war hawks in that village would have a louder voice than anywhere else, and were most likely to begin a new war. Naruto considered the Raikage. The man was unpredictable and impulsive, though capable of great feats of spontaneous genius, or insanity, depending on how you viewed it, and held his entire village's respect. He was also a Kumonin, descended from the first Raikage. This was very important, and was the primary reason Naruto could not immediately say that he wouldn't do anything well. Unpredictable. He wanted peace as much as the next man, he'd said once. He never said how that peace should come about. He was just as likely to try a blitzkrieg attack at the first sign of weakness as he was to continue with the very slowly progressing demilitarization. If anyone but the Raikage tried to start a war, it would quickly fizzle out. If the Raikage declared war, though, it would involve the entire continent and Water Country too. It would be huge, Naruto sighed. The politics and warmongering of the great nations 15 years from now were not relevant yet. He needed to figure out if he had died, or if somehow his memories had really been transferred back. If he wasn't dead in the Kage's box 15 years from now, then that version of him could worry about the war that might or might not break out. If he was dead in that box, well, he wasn't the only one that attack had hit. So, it was possible that Gaara, Hinata, Shikamaru and Temari all remembered as well. But if he was dead, what this was then? He had heard that people watched their lives flash before their eyes when they died, but he had always assumed it to be untrue, or at the very least, a lot faster than this. Naruto hummed, and looked at a clock. He blinked. Wait, didn't he still have to go to the academy right now? Introspection later, shower now. Naruto had a pensive scowl on his face as he walked to the academy. It was out of character for him, sure, but he was still trying to figure what the hell was going on. He looked around, taking in the glares and whispers that the civilians thought of as surreptitious. At least the ninja he saw were a little better at hiding their distaste at his presence, but he wasn't sure if the fact he could tell was down to them being lax or newfound observational skills from his little time jump. Naruto hadn't realized until then just how much the village's opinion of him had changed over time. He'd simply assumed he was better at ignoring the glares, the dark whispers, the general hostility. But then, how would he have become Hokage if everyone still hated him? An A&B Yunin discreetly removed a rogue Chunin who was about to make an attempt, and Naruto very nearly snorted in disbelief. How had he never noticed the A&B Yunin before? They weren't very stealthy around him, which was probably to let other ninja know that, yeah, he was being tailed. Naruto felt a whole new wave of appreciation for the Sandaime when he managed to count as many as 10 A&B Yunin following him. Sandaime. Sarutobi Hiruzen. The old man was still alive. Orochimaru's crush the leaf plan hadn't started yet, or at the very least, it was still in the subtle machinations phase. He had to warn the Sandaime, and tell him what? He asked himself, that he was remembering things that hadn't happened yet? He remembered Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizen and especially the rest of the Konoha 11, even though he hadn't even met Team Guy yet. He even remembered Sai, and he sure as hell hadn't met him yet. Naruto smirked, a genuine smile in the face of hostility this time. Ah, Sai. He was a git at first, but he got better. Oh yeah? He got better. A fierce grin was born as he remembered Sai's instrumental role in deposing Danzo. The look of utter shock on that bastard's face that any of his minions could entertain even the mere concept of betraying him. The number of charges they got on him was impressive though. 6 counts of conspiracy for treason against Konoha, 3 counts of conspiracy against different Hokages, 37 counts of conspiracy against the village council. Naruto didn't blame him for those. A lot of conspiracy charges, but only one of them had to stick. They got 4. Funnily enough, it wasn't even for conspiracy. It was full-on premeditated treason they got him for. Danzo was probably regretting that botched mission to ally with Orochimaru by then. Yeah, thanks partially to Sai, Danzo was no longer a threat. Root was disbanded and its members deprogrammed, and Danzo himself, well, any one of those charges would have earned him a capital sentence. Unfortunately, a lot of Root's members committed suicide once they learned Danzo's fate. Naruto's smile hadn't left his face, though it had faded a bit when he thought of how many had taken their own lives for Danzo's sake, but that hadn't happened yet. It hasn't happened yet. And now I've got enough time to get as good as I can to stop it. And he was going to stop it. He'd stop it all. But first he had to find out if he was alone or not. How to approach Shikamaru and Hinata with this. Naruto walked in, and sat at his usual place in the front of the class, his arms folded and his face scrunched up into his thinking pout. How could he go about this? He'd been thinking about how best to ask Shikamaru and Hinata if they remembered all morning. He hadn't really socialized with either of them in the academy he remembered, but Shikamaru had sometimes joined in on the rare occasion he, Kiba and Chuji had gone on a pranking crusade, if only because Chuji had prodded him into action. But those times were still damned rare. His attention was caught when Shikamaru, sitting in the row above and behind him, dropped a folded square of paper on his desk. He picked it up, unfolded it, and his breath caught when he read the message. Do you remember? He grinned fiercely. So, Shikamaru at least. Which meant he had the best analytical thinker of his generation on hand to figure it out, assuming he hadn't already. He turned to face the lazy genius behind him, who had his usual mask of apathy and annoyance on. Yeah? Naruto had to make sure. This from you? He held up the folded paper, and noticed the spark of recognition in Shikamaru's eyes. Yeah. What's your point? Chuji, next to him, looked confused. Yeah. I remember. But are we talking about the same memory? I'd still remember it 15 years from now. Shikamaru twitched. A small tick below the left eye, he remembered. Same as Naruto. Shikamaru let a small grin creep up on his face. You want to talk about it later? Naruto nodded. Then how about the bench you usually use? Chuji'll come too, if that's alright. Does he remember too? He wasn't there, a scowl, but I trust him. Naruto turned his gaze to Chuji, who looked very lost amidst his friend's double-talk conversation. He seemed more confused that Shikamaru was speaking to Naruto with something close to respect, like he was an authority figure. The tubby, though he'd never call him that to his face, boy was a good-natured soul. He was something of an outcast like Naruto due to his weight, and Naruto liked him. Chuji was one of the few who had never displayed any ill behavior towards him. Chuji, for his part, now found himself on the receiving end of an appraising stare that was wholly alien in Naruto the prankster's eyes. He recognized it as somewhat similar to the gaze that his father used when he first met someone, but he had never been on the receiving end. Chuji shivered. Now he knew why it was so effective. It was like if you tried to hide anything from that stare, you'd fail some sort of test. Naruto had always, quite loudly, declared that he was going to be the Hokage one day. After today, After being visually dissected by the eyes which had made that promise, Chuji would never doubt that ambition again. He felt relief when Naruto finally blinked, smiled, and acknowledged that Chuji could come. He didn't know what they were going to be talking about, but after that uncharacteristically serious look from the normally flighty prankster, he wasn't going to be talking about it to another living soul. Now that Shikamaru's memory was made certain, Naruto's hopeful attention turned to the dark, timid and weird girl at the back of the class. If Shikamaru remembered, there was a good chance she did too. Hinata. She looked up, as though in response, and upon noticing his gaze, made a small squeaking noise and immediately looked away, her face faintly red. She was smiling though, and her fingers weren't pressing together in embarrassment. She remembered he knew she did. She had to. Please let her remember. A sudden commotion at the door drew his attention. Sakura and Ino were entering, and arguing over who it was that would sit next to Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto's eyes went wide. Of course. Sasuke had yet to even activate his two-tomo Sharingan here and now, let alone the Manjikyu. He probably hadn't even heard of Orochimaru yet. How many times, in his youth, had Naruto wished to return to the academy? Before the Chunin exams, before Orochimaru, before Sasuke ran off, seeking power for its own sake. How many times had he wished to return to simpler times, and cherish what little time he had with Sasuke as his all-but brother? He turned to where he expected to see him, his usual seat by the window, because there were 2 seats in that row, and so he only had to endure the presence of one hopeless fangirl. And there he was, in all his brooding, unassailable self-confidence. Hands held to cover his face, black eyes indicating his permanent scowl directed straight ahead. He was restless. He was here to learn. He was here to become powerful, and demonstrate that power to all who doubted him, who sought to drag him down into mediocrity. He was the last of the Uchiha, and he was the elite, even amongst shinobi. This was Sasuke when his arrogance still outweighed his skill. This was Sasuke before his eyes were sealed, and he was locked up in ANBU maximum security, chakra-suppressing seals strong enough to imprison a bija lining the walls. This was Sasuke before he rejected everything Konoha stood for, in the name of power. Naruto was gaping, and he supposed it must have been obvious, because it was necessary for Shikamaru to rap him on the head. The look he gave Naruto when he turned around was clear. Play your part until we figure out what's going on. He then nodded in Sakura's direction. Naruto nodded in affirmation. Right. Kami, this would be painful. Now Sakura-chan, that was close. He'd almost missed her honorific, but his academy persona had never done such a thing. It was always Chan. It was depressingly clear to him now, how she came to think of him as a brother. As an annoying pest of a little brother, who then grew into a figure worthy of respect, but still a brother. Sakura-chan, whack, how many times have I told you not to call me that? The requisite punishment delivered, she turned back to Ino, to resume her fight. Except Ino had taken advantage of her distraction and leapt for the seat next to Sasuke. She stuck her tongue out at her pink-haired rival. Naruto shuddered. This was not going to be pleasant for him. Naruto! You cost me my seat next to Sasuke-kun. He gulped. He was certain Shikamaru was enjoying this. He fought to keep the quaver out of his voice as he spoke. His academy persona didn't know when to shut the hell up, after all. Che! Why would you want to sit next to someone like Sasuke Yaro? Whack! Don't talk about Sasuke-kun with such disrespect, Naruto baka. Sakura-chan. Here, why don't you sit next to me? Whack whack, don't call me that. And why would I want to sit next to you, idiot? Whack again, for good measure. She wandered off to take the seat immediately behind Sasuke, glaring daggers at Ino the entire way, just before Iruka and Mizuki walked into the class. Right, everyone, settle down. Naruto did, his grin appearing again at the sight of the first person to acknowledge him. Not even the sight of Mizuki the traitor could change that. Today, as you know, we've got taijutsu after lunch. First, we're continuing chakra manipulation theory. There was a groan from nearly the entire class. Tell you what, if I think you've all demonstrated a good hold on the basic theory, we'll start on Henj no Jutsu at the end of the week. No? The class erupted into cheers which quickly subdued as they made sure to catch every last word. Naruto cracked his stiff neck as he walked outside. Iruka was just as compelling in his subject matter as he remembered, while he'd managed to make it interesting using a combination of honest enthusiasm and incentives. So much so that, even though Naruto knew everything in the lesson and far more besides, he couldn't help but be drawn in as he had when he was still at the academy. He blinked. He was still at the academy. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Getting used to using the correct tense would take a while, at least in his personal thoughts. He broke off from that tangent when he spotted Chuji and Shikamaru sitting at Naruto's usual bench. Shikamaru! Chuji looked slightly less confused than earlier, though if that was because he thought things were about to be explained or if he was just better at hiding it since then was irrelevant. So, what did you want to talk about? What do you think, Rokudame? There are still A and B following me around at this point, you know. So? To them, we're just having a childish conversation, lost in the halls of ambition and fantasy, right, Rokudame? Though he smirked, the genjutsu I'm using doesn't hurt. Chuji paled at the thought that Naruto was being followed by A and BU. Shikamaru's smirk vanished as he went into strategist mode, lowering his voice. How much do you remember? Up to what point? I know Naruto, why are there A and BU following you around? To stop people from killing me. Naruto's honest answer probably shocked the rotund boy, but he ignored that as he responded to Shikamaru's question. I can remember up to the third match, but after that, it's a little fuzzy. I know there was a mist, and someone attacked the box, but Shikamaru nodded, placing his hands into the square formation he used to think. Shikamaru, what happened to us? Are we? Stop. Say nothing else. We don't want our imaginations to run away with us. Go get Hinata. If she remembers as well, then I'll have a bit more to work with. Shikamaru, I don't know. I don't know, and I can't figure it out yet. Now get Hinata. Naruto was not happy with that answer, but he left the two of them there anyway. Shikamaru, what's going on? Why do people want to kill Naruto? What was he? What attack? Shikamaru, what's going on? Shikamaru barely moved his lips when he responded. Chuji. There are some questions that, legally, only Naruto will be able to answer, but the rest. He took a deep breath, composing his thoughts. Last night, I woke up with memories. Memories that hadn't happened, and that I couldn't possibly have unless something impossible happened. But it has, and I do, and I really hope you appreciate just how serious this situation is, because for once in my life I don't know what's going on. Chuji looked at his friend of 4 years. Shikamaru, although he looked lost in concentration, had an all-too-real look of helpless realization etched across his face. I don't know. Naruto spotted Hinata fairly easily. She was watching him from afar again, partially hidden behind a kunai target. A grin was the only indication that he was happy to see her. Granted, it was a very wide grin. He ran up to her, and she seemed paralyzed by indecision. Still have to keep up the act, Hinata, and I didn't even properly meet until the Chunin exams. Oi, you're Hinata, any? She nodded, a light flush creeping up her face. You don't seem like the other girls, how come you're smart? Well, you're not chasing after Sasuke like the others, so I figured that meant you're smarter than Sakura-chan. Her blush accelerated. He leaned in close, and whispered conspiratorially, so, do you remember? When Naruto, her Naruto from 15 years ago, asked her that, Hinata knew exactly what he meant. It was all she could do to stop herself from flinging her arms around him and shouting that yes. Yes, she remembered everything. When she had woken in the middle of the night, she'd almost screamed, and was torn between wishing it not to be real, and wishing it was. So much that she didn't want to consider if it was real, so much that could go wrong, that should have gone wrong. But if it was real, if it was really real, and she was with Naruto, made him happy, made him laugh, and he did the same for her. But that was last night. She still had a part to play here, and squeaked out, why yes. I remember, Naruto-kun. She was telling the truth, and Naruto knew it. His grin became absolutely blinding. Hinata, his Hinataheim, the real Hinata was here as well. Perhaps this wouldn't be so bad after all. Shikamaru! Chuji responded, but not Shikamaru. Chuji had some idea of what was going on, and the very concept terrified him. He's thinking. Naruto ran up with Hinata in tow. Chuji had no idea how she fit into all this. But still his dad had told him who the Hyuga were, and how to greet them. He stood and bowed. Hinata-san. She waved him off, though more confident than the timid girl he thought she was. That's not necessary, Chuji-kun. Shikamaru-kun, what have you figured out? He didn't answer at first. Shikamaru. Answer her. Naruto was, once again, uncharacteristically grave. Shikamaru, as near as I can tell, this is not a mass genjutsu, or we would not be able to interact with one another. It is entirely possible that this is a genjutsu that is affecting only one of us, with the responses of the others being manipulated by the caster. He cracked open one eye to affix his fellow memory holders with a critical gaze. Have you attempted to dispel genjutsu since you received the memories? Both of them nodded. So have I. Which, while not ruling out genjutsu, certainly makes it less likely. He took a deep breath. I assume you've both already considered that we're just going insane? Naruto nodded sheepishly while Hinata simply looked down. That is no longer a viable option, unless we consider that an outside influence is actively seeding our respective environments with compounds to induce madness. Which, again, is not a viable option, since if they were, these symptoms would be manifest in others of our age group, or those around us. Chuji is living proof that that is not the case. Naruto looked stricken, and Hinata was just as shocked. They both knew what he was about to suggest now. So we must assume that the only remotely viable option left to us is the correct one. Somehow, we have received the memories and personalities of ourselves from precisely 15 years in the future. Naruto's head was still reeling. According to Shikamaru's best guess, this was really happening. He, Hinata, Naruto, and probably Gaara and Temari had somehow been transplanted into their 15 years younger bodies. Although, the way Shikamaru explained it, that was just how it seemed to them because they had got the memories. Their spirits or souls or what have you hadn't really jumped back in time 15 years, that was impossible. They were still them, but they now had future knowledge, which was a very dangerous thing. Of course, he didn't mention that his explanation was just as impossible, but it was more favorable than the alternative. They would have had to be dead for their spirits to depart from their bodies. How? And more to the point, if that is the case, why don't we remember remembering? Shikamaru nodded. Are any of you familiar with divergent principle? All three shook their heads. It's a theory of temporal mechanics which states that for every choice we make, every event that occurs, another, opposite choice is made. For example, somewhere there's a world where Iwa beat Konoha in the Third Great War. He paused at seeing their shock at the very idea that the yellow flash could have failed. Never mind. The point is that the moment this happened, it created an alternate timeline. The future we remember wasn't affected because in that world, we never received these memories. Which means that anything we do here won't affect said timeline or memories, or cause a self-fulfilling paradox or whatever, so you can stop worrying about that, Naruto. I wasn't. Blank stares from Hinata and Shikamaru. Fine. Chuji was still white as a sheet. His best friend had memories that were really, not supposed to be there, and Naruto was acting serious, and Hinata wasn't shy. Chuji plopped down and started snacking, convinced that the world was about to end. We're discussing this in full view and hearing of an ANBU squad. Shouldn't we be more careful? Oh, come on. It's a low-level genjutsu. It's so weak they haven't even noticed. It'll blur our speech and hide our lips. They won't hear anything or be able to lip-read. Chuji was sweating now. Shikamaru, the Shikamaru he knew, definitely did not know any genjutsu, nor was he crafty enough to fool ANBU. But that was kind of the point, wasn't it? This wasn't the Shikamaru he knew, not anymore. So, what are going to do with this future knowledge? Do nothing. Chuji had found a voice. I'm serious. If you try to manipulate events according to what you know will happen, it'll backfire, horribly. No one should ever take that risk. Just act like you normally would. But that's acting the way you told us not to, Chuji. Hell, just by calling this meeting we've changed the way things happen. We should try and make sure that some of the bad stuff that happens, doesn't, and what happens to you shapes who you are. If you change events so that they're more favorable towards you, it will change other people's experiences, and they won't turn out the way you remember them. Naruto remembered Sasuke. Kneeling, chained in ANBU max security, the eyes he was so proud of sealed away. What if that's a good thing? Hinata's fingers brushed against his. She knew who he was talking about. As if to drive home the point, Naruto looked over to where Sasuke was brooding, alone, his gaggle of fangirls watching him from the next corner. What if you don't like what some people have become? Unfortunately, Naruto, I agree with Chuji, but in moderation. Naruto shot him a dirty look. So, it's okay to let Sasuke. That's not what I meant. You can't make people's choices for them. If Sasuke wants to run off to Orochimaru and be a complete and utter git, then that's his choice. You can try to stop him if you want, but it was his choice, and his path to take. If you really tried, you could stop him, like you tried to before, but it's still his choice. Yes, we have future knowledge. Yes, that gives us a huge advantage over our enemies in terms of protecting the people and places close to us. But if those same people make choices that put them in harm's way, we don't have any right to take that choice from them. Naruto faltered. He knew who Shikamaru was thinking of, like Asuma. Yes, Naruto-kun. I agree with Shikamaru. We have been given this knowledge for some reason. It is inevitable that we would take advantage of that knowledge to become stronger, but we cannot use that same knowledge to manipulate our loved ones without their knowing. If we do, we become as bad as those we try to protect them from. Naruto was silent. They were right. He hated it, but they were right. He couldn't make Sasuke's choice regarding Orochimaru for him, but he could make damn sure Sasuke had his priorities straight. He ran off for power, for revenge? Then Naruto was going to show him that they weren't worth having unless you had something to protect. Sasuke thought Naruto was powerless because he stayed in the village? He'd kick his ass, and show him how powerful you became with something to fight for beyond yourself. You're right. We can't stop them from making choices, be they right or wrong. His eyes glinted with determination. But that doesn't mean we can't help make them see when they're wrong. That doesn't mean we can't become strong enough to protect them from their own failures. Naruto's determination was back in full force. We become strong to protect those we love. We become stronger from each failure we make to protect them. We can't shield them from every failure they make, but we can make the failure hurt less by being there for them. Hinata spoke confidently, without a trace of stutter. Failure and success are unavoidable in life. What choices we make, what strength we have, it's inevitable that one day we'll screw up, or meet someone we can't possibly defeat. It's human nature. We are not perfect. But we do the best we can, from day to day. We're not perfect, and all we can do is but try. Shikamaru's voice, speaking a futile effort that was worth it, seemed foreign in the mouth of the lazy genius. All present felt the underlying spirit that filled every word. And Chuji no longer felt quite so afraid. We can but try, Naruto smirked. He had a few years to put together, run through, and fulfill an intensive training regimen that would get him powerful enough to take on Sasuke and prove to him what the worth of power was. He already knew what his chakra nature was, so basic chakra nature manipulation exercises would be easy. He'd have to wait until Jiraiya before he could get the Rasengan or his Toad contract, the former if only to avoid suspicion. He'd also have to wait until Mizuki's eventual betrayal to get Kage Bunshin, which meant he'd have to play dead last again. It was infuriating, so what else could he do? Well, chakra control. He'd definitely benefit from that, and more, he knew the necessary exercises to perform for it. A thought then occurred to him. Do I have to play dead last? I already know Kage Bunshin, the seals and the necessary chakra for it. Do I really have to play dead last, just to get Mizuki to reveal himself? Yes. Too many bonds were forged that night. Too many revelations and secrets thrown into the open. And he was not willing to let Mizuki simmer away in the background, like an exploding tag that could go off at any time. So, play the idiot. It'll hurt Iruka to find out, but it will hopefully hurt a lot less in the long run. Taijutsu, as well, would have to be in there. It physically hurt to think of how uncoordinated he was now. If it wasn't for his ability to pull impossible strategies out of his ass, he doubted he'd have survived to Chunin. He was uncomfortable relying on nothing but luck. So, Taijutsu. But he'd need to find someone who would see some real improvement in his forms. No offense to Iruka-sensei, but Taijutsu was not his strong point. Mizuki, their academy Taijutsu instructor, was also not a good idea, the treacherous bastard. He needed someone either Jounin level or special Jounin in Taijutsu. Unfortunately, only one person came to mind, and it meant he would have to befriend someone in the year above, as well as wait for a year. Why didn't he know any Taijutsu specialists other than Mado Guy? He'd started looking into Fuinjutsu after Akatsuki's defeat, to try and understand more about his seal. He'd been enchanted. Fuinjutsu was, at first sight, so unpredictable, so arcane. But once you understood how contradictory it could be, and just how chakra interacted within each part of a seal, it began to feel more like a cross between art and a puzzle. You were trying to create a masterpiece, but you only had so many colors, and if you mixed them to get what you needed, sometimes it would create a color you weren't expecting at all. If nothing else, Naruto wanted a head start on that. He calmed down and thought things through, like Tsunade had told him to do when being Hokage became too stressful. Taijutsu was a glaring necessity, since it had an impact on how well his favorite technique, Kage Bunshin, performed. Chakra control was less so, since, thanks to the Kyuubi, he had chakra to spare, but it was still necessary for his combat techniques, along with training in nature manipulation and sage techniques. If possible, he could also work on developing his chakra coils to handle even more chakra. He wanted to have as much leeway as possible before having to call upon unfiltered Kyuubi chakra, but he would still have to be careful about how much he progressed. He needed to remain dead last so that Mizuki would reveal his true colors, so he could end up on Team 7, so that he could stay beneath the radar of so many who feared what the young Jinchuriki might do should he actually become competent. So, Taijutsu, which he would have to wait at least a year for. Chakra control. Fuinjutsu. Chakra nature manipulation. Sage chakra, which he didn't dare attempt in this body without having Fukasaku on hand to smack it out of him if he screwed up. He sighed. Chakra control would be easiest to work on in secret. He could practice on his apartment walls and in a bathtub. Nature manipulation, afterwards, would be just as easy, at first. Nobody would even notice him trying to cut a leaf with his chakra. They might notice him trying to cut a waterfall, though. Fuinjutsu, well, that was a largely mental challenge, but it meant he'd need to work on his calligraphy. The library, besides, would have several useful texts on both subjects. While it would be out of character for him, it might just send a message that he was serious about his shinobi training, he just wasn't shining, which was exactly the message he wanted to send for now. But first, he'd need to befriend a fellow outcast. Hinata strode through the Hyuga compound to her room, unheeding of the strange look she attracted. True, seeing the normally shy and timid Hyuga heir behaving quite so authoritatively was unusual enough that someone might think she had been replaced. In a way, she had. This Hinata had 11 years of her father's respect, 7 in a romantic relationship with the man she loved, and 3 as head of the Hyuga clan. She was going to make sure she had a lot more of the second, but she wasn't looking forward to becoming clan head anytime soon, especially considering it was a lifelong position. She didn't want the current clan head to be retiring anytime soon. It would also be impossible for her to gain her father's respect sooner. She had to fall, so that she and another could truly rise. So, now began the task of augmenting her training regimen in a way that wouldn't raise suspicions when she lost to Niji in her first Chunin exams. Yes, she still had to lose. The wounds that Niji had, and still nursed, wouldn't heal properly, nor would he realize his true potential as a shinobi, unless he lost to someone unconnected to the Hyuga, and whom he deemed unworthy, someone he believed would never be able to defeat him because they were fated to be weak, someone like Naruto. For any Hyuga, precise chakra control was a must, since it allowed more precise use of the Byakugan, and its accompanying taijutsu style, the Juken. It was even more important for Hinata, as her, so far, ultimate technique relied on chakra control so precise that she could strike a wasp in mid-flight. Following that taijutsu, specifically the Juken style. It was the trademark of the Hyuga clan, and was how many Hyuga chose to measure their skill, never mind that some of them might have excelled in other pursuits. Medical ninjutsu would have to wait. Her Byakugan had ensured her actual medical ninjutsu were efficient at an unprecedented level, but the areas not based on practical chakra, the theory and various different poisons and diseases and corresponding symptoms, she had trouble taking it in all at once, even with a teacher as understanding as Sakura. Exercises to exploit her chakra nature, water, would help her chakra control as well, and they could be performed innocently enough. A few extra minutes in the bath, a few extra hours on her own at the pond. Her father had not begrudged her that while she was still at the academy, no matter how disappointed he seemed to be in her. So, chakra control, Juken, chakra nature manipulation, medical techniques. She bit her lip. It would be difficult, very difficult, to excel as she wanted in the Juken style without anyone noticing. Her father periodically checked in with her taijutsu tutor, sparing at least a thought for his less able daughter. Chakra control, on the other hand, was very difficult to quantify, so she may excel there without fear. She smiled. Good. She had a plan, Shikamaru was thinking. He was doing a lot more of that than usual, recently, thinking. Now, he was thinking about how to improve his abilities ahead of schedule. In the timeline he could remember, most of his training had been focused on improving his already considerable situational analysis skills. As a result, he didn't need to now. So, what areas was he lacking in, and what areas would he definitely benefit from improving? Physically? Everything. His taijutsu was subpar. Since he had relied on his mind and his specialized ninjutsu to get out of most uncomfortably close encounters, he had also left most of the physical work to Chuji, or to anyone he was grouped with who happened to fill the role of heavy combat specialist. His chakra control, while good enough to make use of his clan's hijutsu, would also benefit from intensive training, since when dealing with Kage no Jutsu and its branch techniques, chakra control was less important than having the necessary reservoir of chakra to keep it going, and so had been slightly neglected. He had nowhere near as much chakra as, say, Naruto, but his chakra potential had been one of the highest of his age group. That said, chakra control exercises would allow him to make more efficient use of chakra for Kage, which, in turn, would let him use it for longer. Genjutsu. It was an area that Shikamaru had only touched upon before the incident that had resulted in the memory jump, but Kurenai had told him he had something of a knack for it. However, he'd need greater chakra control before he tried that again. Stamina was the most important quality any Naro shinobi could make use of, since it dictated how much chakra you could make use of for the Kage before collapsing or having to resort to soldier pills. And his stamina would be best increased by taijutsu training. Shikamaru organized what he would be training himself in order of necessity. Stamina, via taijutsu, chakra control, genjutsu. He almost smirked. Taijutsu, ninjutsu, and the necessary chakra control, genjutsu, in that same order, was the core of the academy curriculum. Students were taught taijutsu first, along with chakra manipulation theory, then moved on to divergent taijutsu, where the students would choose the styles that would carry through for life, coupled with basic seals and chakra molding, then advanced, for genin, taijutsu, plus the 3 academy techniques, and touched upon genjutsu theory. How fortunate, then, that was exactly what he needed to do. It wouldn't look quite so strange for him to be studying advanced forms of what they were covering at the academy, now would it? Assuming he got caught doing so, Chuji was worried. He wasn't afraid, not anymore. Well, maybe he was still afraid. Just a bit, though. He was worried for Shikamaru. Heck, he was worried for Naruto and Hinata too. He'd barely known them before today, but now it seemed they trusted him with their lives. And it did seem like it was their lives they were trusting him with, too. Intentionally interfering in an ANBU operation? He never even considered he could be that close to an ANBU nin, but apparently they'd been following Naruto since he could walk. That was another thing. People were trying to kill Naruto. The ANBU had been assigned to protect him on the orders of the Hokage himself. This was way over Chuji's head, but now, somehow, Shikamaru was involved in it, which meant that so was Chuji. While Chuji was young, and some would say naive, he had a fierce sense of loyalty burning within his rotund frame. All Akimichi did. Friends who could see beyond the Akimichi's husky exterior to the kind-hearted soul within were few and far between, even for shinobi, and every Akimichi knew to treasure every last one of them. Shikamaru was his friend. His best friend. His first real friend. Chuji would charge into hell and back to keep him safe, if need be. But after today, after what he had heard, Chuji was worried. Shikamaru had matured, literally overnight, into someone who might not need protecting anymore. Or worse, become someone who was going to face dangers that Chuji was, right now, too weak to protect him from. He was worried that Shikamaru was going somewhere he wouldn't be able to follow, somewhere where Chuji's immense strength for his age meant nothing. No, Shikamaru was still Shikamaru. Regardless of whether or not he had future knowledge, he was still the same lazy genius who saw what Chuji was really worth, on that lonely summer's day. He was just a bit older, and wiser now, and in Chuji's opinion, that could only be a good thing. But damned if Chuji was going to let his friend leave him behind. Chuji quickly finished off the chips in his hand, and leapt up from the bench where he had been pointlessly brooding. If his friend was going down a more dangerous path, then Chuji owed it to him to become more dangerous as well. He was going to get tougher, and stronger, and smarter, and big enough to cover Shikamaru's back no matter what. If Shikamaru was ever going to walk willingly into hell, then he, Akimichi Chuji, was going to be there every step of the way, and woe to the fool of a demon who dared to try and get past him. He sped off towards the rooftop where Shikamaru typically watched the clouds. Hey, things couldn't have changed that much, right, Shikamaru? The lazy genius looked up, to see Chuji standing at the top of the steps. He was breathing heavily, and sweating profusely, as though he had sprinted across Konoha to get here. Shikamaru! I know that you've changed now, and that you're going to get stronger a lot faster now. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. This was sounding suspiciously like a farewell, you're going somewhere I can't follow speech. And I know that because of that, you're going to be facing dangers way beyond me, dangers that I probably haven't even dreamed of before now. But I don't care, you're my friend, Shikamaru. I don't know if the future me told you this or not, or if you already knew some other way, but I'll tell you right now, to an Akimichi, a friend is a friend for life. I'm not going to run away, or complain that I'm too weak to follow where you're going, or try and pull you back. Nothing like that. I'll follow you into hell and back again, and I'll watch your back the whole way. He seemed to collapse slightly then, as though he thought his promise was ridiculous. I know I'm not strong enough right now. But you can help me change that. You know my strengths, my weaknesses, how I can improve, what I have to do to improve at the pace you're going to set. You're my friend, Shikamaru. And I'm not going to abandon that, no matter what. I'm just not built that way. If the stakes get tougher, so will I. If the road gets more dangerous, so will I. If your enemies get even stronger, then so will I. Shikamaru eyed him for a long while. Future Chuji had, indeed, told he and Ino about the Akimichi's philosophy regarding friends, and how it came about. Back then, Shikamaru had been touched. He had interpreted it as a sign of Chuji's faith in both of them, as well as in his own ability to protect the both of them. But this, Chuji, barely 10 years old, was essentially telling him he would be watching out for him for the rest of his life, and he had just declared the Akimichi philosophy much louder and far more passionately than he had over that yakitori, so many years from now. He smiled. Chuji had matured, mentally speaking, and a lot faster than he had anticipated. He wondered if the other Chuji had been this mature as well. Well, when you put it like that, I don't really have much of a choice, do I? Chuji almost faltered, then saw his friend's teasing grin. His face lit up instead. No, you don't, right? Come over here, and I'll tell what you should be working on, and when you should work on it. And then, we need to go to Ichiraku's. Ichiraku's? Shikamaru smirked knowingly. Yeah. We're pooling battle plans. Chuji didn't know what to make of that, but he continued to grin fiercely. I told Naruto that I trust Chuji with this, and he just validated that trust. Chuji, my friend, I will never doubt you again. Tuchi-jisan. Tuchi looked up, and there, as he expected, was Naruto. His best customer, hands down, for 4 years running. Ayam looked up from the noodles simmering in broth, a smile on her face. She thought of Naruto as the endearing little kid from down the street. He was the kind of kid you can't help but like, because not liking him would be like kicking a puppy. Ah, Naruto. The usual 6 bowls, then, That would be great, Tuchiji-san, but he pulled out his toad wallet. Gama-chan's been putting himself on a pretty harsh diet, it was true. The thing barely had 50 ryu inside it. Tuchi smiled sympathetically. I see. Tell you what, Naruto. You're a good customer, and a regular, so first bowls on the house tonight, any? His face lit up immediately. Really? Thanks, Tuchiji-san. Ha! Don't mention it. You eat here so often, I'm amazed you even have any money left. So, it's only fair that you get something at my expense, once in a while. Naruto grinned sheepishly. Well, it's better than anything else in Konoha, you know? After Tuchi turned away, Naruto spoke quietly, wistfully to himself. Sometimes I wonder if this is what home cooking tastes like. Sorry, Naruto, did you say something? Nope. Alright then, what's it to be tonight? Miso. He took his wallet and counted. Then pork and then beef, and then that's it for tonight. Tuchi grinned. 1 miso ramen on the house, coming up. Thank you again. Naruto sat there, fiddling with his chopsticks, waiting for his free ramen and his friends. As he waited, he contemplated the routine he had set up for himself. It likely wouldn't be as extensive as the others since he had an image to maintain until a certain point in time, but he would still benefit. Good evening, Naruto-kun. Hinata had crept up behind him, and was bowing politely, as she was expected to do in public. Naruto grinned, and got off his stool. Good evening, Hinata-san. He bowed formally in return. Why don't you join me? Ichiraku's ramen is the best. Of course it was. She knew it was, and he knew she knew it was. He had taken her here on their first not really a date but kinda sorta actually a date because I'm paying for you. She had loved it. Especially the vegetable ramen. Of course. I would be honored. She seated herself demurely on the stool, and politely ordered vegetable ramen from the old man she knew had been so kind to Naruto for nearly his entire life. Coming right up, Hyuga-sama. Oh. So he recognized her eyes. Hinata is fine, he responded with a smile. A Hyuga who wasn't an arrogant, stuck-up prat was a welcome change of pace. Not that any of the other Hyuga deigned to lower themselves to eat from a ramen stand. Then, one vegetable ramen coming right up, Hinata-san. I looked up, and saw Hinata sitting next to Naruto. She also noticed the way the two of them were fidgety around the other. She winked conspiratorially at Hinata when next her attention was directed that way. Hinata knew what was being implied, and despite herself, flushed a light pink. Oh Naruto, Hinata, why oh Naruto? Hinata! Shikamaru and Chuji wandered into view. Oi Shikamaru, Chuji, good evening to you both. Tucci was overjoyed. Any Akimichi was a good customer. On the rare occasion they opted for something other than home cooking. They were polite, always paid, and they loved to eat. So, what'll you kids be having? Miso ramen. No egg, please. Naruto couldn't believe his ears. If you don't want the egg, then give it to me. Shikamaru shrugged in response as Chuji placed his order. Miso and pork, then beef. Then we'll see from there. Chuji, we'll only have enough time for one bowl. Both Naruto and Chuji turned to Shikamaru with a dangerous glint in their eyes, as if to say, not the way we eat ramen, fine. Mendoku's nah. Shikamaru turned out to be wrong. By the time he and Hinata were halfway through their ramen, Naruto and Chuji were already starting on their third bowl each. Naruto gazed longingly at the bowl of hot broth and noodles in front of him. This was to be his last for the night, so it had to last. He breathed in the aroma emanating from the bowl. The mix of spices and food that defined Ichiraku's ramen tantalizingly wafting through his nostrils. His chin felt wet, and he realized he was drooling. Wiping his mouth off, he took his chopsticks to town, after a hurried, itadakimasu. In that time, Chuji had finished his third bowl, and was asking for a fourth serving. He knew this was all he'd have time for, so he made sure to savor it as well. He didn't take quite as long as Naruto did to appreciate the smell that heralded the flavor, but he certainly took his time with this bowl. They still finished around the same time as Shikamaru and Hinata, however. Ichiraku's is the best. There can be no evil amongst the lovers of Ichiraku's. It's just ramen, no matter how good. But it was good. It was wonderful, Naruto-kun. Leaving their money for the ramen on the counter, they left for the night. Now, while three of them had future knowledge, and the other was very strong for his age, they weren't arrogant. When I say night, I mean evening. The sun was just setting, and they were kind of in a hurry to get home before dark. Shikamaru, that genjutsu, was done back at Ichiraku's. We can talk. Naruto nodded. Right. Well, who wants to go first? Hinata cleared her throat. I think it should be you, Naruto-kun. Me? Regardless of time period or age, you are, at least to Shikamaru and myself, the sixth Hokage. We will defer to you in cases like this. Naruto looked between his two friends who had jumped back with him. Chuji, I've never seen you in the robes, but after that stare you gave me earlier today, I don't doubt you'll achieve that ambition. I'll follow Shikamaru's lead in this kind of situation anyway. Chuji grinned. I'm going to see you in those robes. Don't let me down, Rokudame-sama. Naruto nodded in acknowledgement. Shikamaru coughed. We don't have much time. Right. I can't really improve that much at the moment. Frowns from his friends. They knew he was better than that. It's not because I think I'm perfect at this stage. I'm not that stupid. It's I have to continue to play the part of dead last. There's a lot at stake here, and I can't let my pride get in the way of that. He inhaled. But there are some areas I'm going to be focusing on. Chakra control, for one. I'll be able to do that in secret, along with chakra nature manipulation. Chuji gawked. You're going to? Or if Sasuke can do it, why not me? It wasn't a malicious comeback, and Chuji looked suitably sheepish at that. I'm also going to try and get a head start on my Fuinjutsu, so don't be surprised if my handwriting improves considerably. I didn't know you were practicing Fuinjutsu? I did. Hinata said quietly. I was just getting into it. It's actually kinda interesting. It's like a puzzle that's missing pieces, and you have to invent the pieces yourself as you go along. Shikamaru was thoughtful. That does sound interesting, Naruto grinned. Shikamaru loved puzzles, but he loved strategy games more. Alright, Hinata, how about you? Hinata nodded, cleared her throat as elegantly as she could, and told them of her plans. Unfortunately, like Naruto-kun, I need to slightly retard my progress in some areas, such as my Juken. I need to become stronger, but not too much stronger, or it will raise questions. When she paused. Should she tell them? They might understand when Niji and Aisen defeats me in the Chunin exams. As expected, a loud noise of protest from Naruto. You can't let that happen, Hinata. I remember what he did to you, even if you don't. You were in hospital for a month after Chuji had gone slightly pale, while Shikamaru was carefully looking everywhere except Naruto. He'd already guessed Hinata's reasons for this, but still, Naruto-kun. Hinata was using a tone she had only acquired after they had started seeing each other. It was a firm, even tone, that did not vary one octave when she spoke. When she next spoke, it was in her normal, softer voice. I know you do not want that to happen again. I don't relish the idea either. But for Niji and Ai-san's sake, I must. If I were to defeat him, he would simply attribute it to the main family being stronger after all, and he would simply lock himself into his ridiculous rut of self-destruction with all that destiny nonsense. The only one who can defeat him satisfactorily, that is, to the point that he can finally realize his true potential, must be someone with no connection to him, personally, or the Hyuga clan. It must be someone whom he despises as weak, as someone who will never be strong enough to defeat him if they stay true to their destiny. It must be you, Naruto-kun. Naruto stared at her, long and hard. He wanted nothing more than to hug her, right there. To let her know with his body warmth, that she was strong, stronger than Niji would ever be, to be able to do something like this just so someone else could make himself whole again. To let her know that he was there, to reassure her that he would never, could never, see her as weak. But he couldn't. Shikamaru's genjutsu was blurring words and lip movement, but it wouldn't obscure physical contact. If he hugged her, now, as he so wanted, they would be found out. None of what they hoped to achieve would come to pass. Finally, in a cracked voice, Hinata, she smiled. I will be all right. With that, she went back to listing what she would be working on. I will be unable to improve my juken to any great degree without arousing suspicion when certain events come to pass. I will, however, be able to work on my chakra control in secret quite easily, as well as chakra nature manipulation. That, unfortunately, will have to comprise the bulk of my secret training until the Chunin exams are over. But do not think for 1 second that I will be as helpless before my cousin as I was before. I will fight, and I will lose. But I will not fall so easily as last time. She seemed to take some perverse inner strength from that. I guess it's me next. Shikamaru scratched his head. Well, I don't really have any special event I have to keep myself weak for, but I do need to keep my performance in class in the same region, or I risk making top of the class. And that'd be bad, any? Naruto nodded. While he was not averse to the idea of having Shikamaru in his team, it wouldn't work. The Ino Shikacho trio had, and always would have, a bond of teamwork that would likely surpass these genin team selections well into future generations. Anyway, my secret training is going to follow the academy curriculum, more or less, taijutsu, chakra control, genjutsu. After all, no one's going to see anything wrong with an academy student reading beyond class material, any? He smirked casually, and Naruto had to smirk along with him. Using academy material as a cover was nothing short of brilliant. Well, I pretty much covered what I'm going over. My taijutsu is bad. Not unworkable, but it's never been as good as it could have been. My techniques rely on chakra control and chakra reserves more than most, and well, as for the last one, Kurenai said I had something of a gift with genjutsu. When did she tell you that? When I was killing time waiting for Saruko to get ready for training. Kurenai got me to try a basic genjutsu for a laugh, and afterwards she told me I was better than she expected of a first-timer. After that, we started discussing genjutsu theory when I came to collect Saruko, and she had me try a few more basic genjutsu. I actually learned the one we're using to fool the A and B from her. Naruto made an O, and dropped the subject. Well, shall we leave for now? We'll see each other at the academy. Chuji coughed. I haven't mentioned what I'll be doing. Naruto's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but he still acted like he expected it. Looks like your trust was well placed, Shikamaru. Chuji blushed at the compliment, but quickly shook it off. From what Shikamaru explained to me, my weakness is, and always will be, chakra control, purely because of the nature of some of my techniques. So I'll be focusing on that, really heavily. I want to be as efficient as I can be with my chakra. But since my strength is taijutsu, coupled with my physical strength, I plan on maximizing that advantage to the fullest. I'll be pestering my dad to practice with me as much as possible, and I'm going to start wearing weighted armor. Taijutsu and chakra control. My strength and my weakness. I plan to make my strength unbeatable, and to eliminate my weakness. Chuji had a fire in his eyes that reminded him uncomfortably of the boy he was about to befriend purely for his own selfish purposes, and he had almost shot his gaze to Shikamaru when Chuji had mentioned weight training. Naruto took in the people gathered around him. Hinata, ready to make a very real sacrifice for the sake of her cousin, Shikamaru, thanks to his transplanted memories, wasn't nearly as lazy as he used to be. Chuji, who, despite his lack of future knowledge, had matured visibly, in the way he walked, and the way he carried himself. He had an unshakable faith now, in his friend, and in himself. Naruto examined his own hands. Had he changed too? Was it visible to others? Naruto-kun. He looked up at Hinata. We're proud of you, Naruto-kun. We all are. He smiled. Then, in the last semblance of the Hokage he would be, he told them to separate. Shikamaru's genjutsu fell, and they all walked back to their respective homes. As Shikamaru and Chuji walked the short distance they had to together, Shikamaru noticed Chuji was grinning strangely. What? I can't believe I didn't think of this before, but you had a girlfriend in the future, right? Shikamaru racked his brains, desperate to recall when he might have mentioned Temari. If Chuji knew too much about the Chunin exams as well. Yeah. I did, thought so. So, what was Kurenai like? Shikamaru froze in his tracks. When Chuji looked back at him, he saw a look of absolute horror plastered across his face. Shikamaru? No, 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 no! Chuji was confused. No, Kurenai wasn't dear Kami, no. She was with Asuma sensei, for Kami's sake. Who? It couldn't hurt to tell him this, at least. He had to understand just why that was no. Kurenai is one of the Jounin sensei assigned to our class following graduation. Asuma is the Jounin sensei assigned to us. Shikamaru shuddered. Just no. She's old enough to be my mother. I was alone with her because I had taken on her daughter as my apprentice. Chuji blanched. Oh, sorry. Heh. Shikamaru shuddered again. So who was your girlfriend? Shikamaru immediately broke off towards his family's home. Good night, Chuji. At least tell me if I know her. No. Was that a no, I don't, or good night, Chuji? A few months had passed, and they were meeting again. It happened often enough that the ANBU could report to the Hokage that Naruto had made friends. Naruto knew that the Sandaime would be pleased to hear that, and he had no real reason to contradict him. After all, they really were his friends. So, how's everyone doing with their training? They'd learned to speak in semi-code now. The ANBU would have eventually wised up to the genjutsu sooner or later when they realized it happened every time they met. Chuji continued to eat whenever they saw him, though. Unsurprising, really, considering how many Akimichi Hijitsu were dependent on body weight. Shikamaru answered for him. Well, Chuji's told me that he's doing well with his taijutsu. I'd have to agree, based on last week's performance against Kiba. The much faster Inuzuka had narrowly avoided a broken leg from one of Chuji's strikes. The Akimichi family style, while slow, consisted of many physically powerful moves, and even a novice was capable of breaking bones with just a glancing blow. As a result, only a few students were allowed to pair off against him in taijutsu practice, and even then, they were observed carefully, the proctor stepping in if serious injury was about to be sustained. Chuji was no longer a novice in the Akimichi style, however, and even the proctors would be in danger of injury were he unable to pull contact blows. We've been practicing chakra control together, and he's good enough to walk now, instead of just running. We're starting the watery side of things tomorrow. Chuji was not embarrassed by his friend's rundown of his abilities, nor did he display as such. Rather, he was intensely proud of the fact that he had mastered a Genin-level chakra control exercise before he had even graduated. Granted, it wasn't Chunin-level practice or Jounin-level theory like the rest of them, but he didn't have the benefit of future knowledge, and every path begins with the first step. He would catch up, though. Of that, Chuji was certain. I'm doing well with my taijutsu, thanks to practice with Chuji. I'm faster and a little stronger than I used to be. He was referring to the other him, the him he would be if not for the event. And my extra studies are going well, too. While the theory is pretty simple, it's putting it into practice that's the tricky part. It always was. Shikamaru hadn't noticeably changed. He still refused to volunteer information in class, and to any casual observer, he'd just be your regular lazy student. He did, however, put in some effort in class. The tests he had been too lazy to pick up the pencil for, before, he still slept through, but only after he had written the answers, with a few wrong in just the right places, to make sure he didn't call attention to himself. His chakra control and stamina had improved dramatically, as well. He was honestly amazed by how much improvement a little hard work had caused. Asuma was going to get quite a shock when he received their genin team in a few months. My chakra control is also progressing smoothly. Hinata carried herself far differently from just a year ago, no longer cowed and timid in the presence of others. She spoke quietly still, but that just made the difference between her firmer speech, when she used it, all the more noticeable. My taijutsu is advancing a little faster than I had intended, but it's possible that's to be expected, considering what I now know. Indeed, she seemed to be reading her instructor's movements far better than she had been before, which affected both how quickly she picked up new forms, and how well she was able to perform against her instructor. She needed to be very careful with this, as she couldn't afford to advance too quickly. I have also gained a renewed appreciation for nature. All present smiled at the allusion to her chakra nature manipulation. They had no doubts of that. Her chakra nature was one of two possibilities from her bloodline, and frankly, Hinata did not seem the lightning nature type. That atmosphere of happy appreciation was dampened considerably by the foreknowledge of what was going to happen to her in the Chunin exams. The selections had supposedly been random, but no one, not even the visiting foreign genin from Suna and Oto, had doubted that Hinata's matchup against her cousin was anything but random. She needed to improve, yes, so that she would not be at a complete loss when she began her training anew following the exams, and she was doing so. But for her cousin's sake, she had to hold back, restrict her development so no one would suspect her of throwing the fight, and she was doing so. Naruto, perhaps, had the most to hide, and he was, with the exception of a few blips, doing superbly. Well, my taijutsu's improved. Not enough to climb up the class rankings, but it's definitely better. Mizuki-sensei was really surprised when I told him about Lee's new sensei helping me out. My chakra control's a lot better too. My extra studies are really interesting, and I don't think I'll ever have to buy exploding tags again. He wouldn't have to buy them because he would be able to make them. Eventually. And all leaves tremble in the trees at my approach. A gust of wind blew through the forest they were facing then, producing a rustling sound from the leaves in question. Naruto laughed loudly, keeping his facade as the loud dead last firmly in place. No one in class, not even the reserved and incredibly observant Abirame Shino, suspected Naruto of being anything more than he was the last time around. Not even when he had befriended Konoha's beautiful green beast, before he was green. At first, Naruto had been planning to approach Lee before he left the academy last year, but then decided that, no matter how much he would benefit, finding and befriending Lee for that reason alone would have been manipulative to an extent he just wasn't comfortable with. So, imagine his surprise when he ended up befriending the bushy-browed boy anyway, after coming to his aid against some other students from Lee's class. Naruto hadn't even recognized Lee without the green one piece and bowl cut, so obviously inspired by Guy's influence, and had just acted on his dislike of bullies. When Lee thanked him profusely for his aid, then, upon recognizing him as a fellow outcast among the academy students, Lee for his underdeveloped coils, Naruto, for no reason that Lee was aware of, declared that they should, from that point onwards, be friends. It had been very difficult to say no to him. So he hadn't. Those who have no one have only each other. As Lee had put it, a few weeks after Lee had graduated, he had approached Naruto in new, and altogether more familiar clothing, and insisted rather forcefully that Naruto meet his amazing and brilliant sensei, who had shown Lee how to passionately harness the power of the springtime of youth. Naruto had not been surprised to be introduced to Mato Guy. Guy had been a little confused when he was introduced to an academy student, but once Lee explained how he had met Naruto, and that they had been friends in his final year, the loud jounin had been ecstatic to meet someone who shared his beloved student's passion, drive, and untapped potential of youth. Lee had then, without any prodding or requests from Naruto, asked Guy if Naruto could train with them in the afternoons. So began Naruto's taijutsu tutoring alongside the green beasts of Konoha. Naruto knew from future knowledge that Mizuki had actively sabotaged his taijutsu training, but it still felt a little humiliating when Guy had to correct every single one of his basic forms. Naruto had not become a disciple of Guken like Lee, content with the branch form he'd chosen from the academy, dragon style. The first time around, he'd chosen it solely because it had sounded cool. He had been an idiot, back then, but dragon-style taijutsu would suit him well, when he used it correctly, and this time he chose it because he knew most of the forms already. The difference in styles between his wonderful students hadn't put off Guy in the slightest. The zodiac styles taught at the academy were all descended from Guken, after all. So, Naruto had been put through his paces every afternoon, with Guy even going so far as to insist that Naruto aped Lee's training methods. Completely. Beginning with his clothes. It seemed Guy wanted another green beast to join the proud and the beautiful, Guy and Lee, respectively. To him, orange was respectable enough, at least for hiding leg weights, but green was the true color of champions. Naruto had declined the garish one piece, stating that his current clothes were a form of training. If he could hide in his bright orange jumpsuit, he could hide in anything. His reason, which Naruto had come up with on the spot, was enough to get Guy and Lee roaring about how dedicated Naruto was to the creed of a ninja. Naruto had just smiled and nodded. Iruka frowned as he continued marking the pop quiz he'd given his class. Their graduation was coming up in a couple months now, and he was trying to scare them into extra study with random tests and individual touching demonstrations. In most cases, it was working, with even his mediocre students' average score going up. His highest scorers were also improving because of it, even if the improvement wasn't as noticeable. But with some, it just wasn't getting through, like this paper. Uzumaki Naruto was the name at the top, written in flawless kanji. The answers on the paper were similarly written in neat, flawless script. Iruka had been pleasantly surprised when Naruto's handwriting started to improve, and it was now to the point that you wouldn't even know it was the same person, were you to hold up two samples from a year apart. Iruka had made sure to congratulate Naruto on this, encouraging scholastic behavior whenever he displayed it. But why couldn't the rest of his scholarly efforts improve as much? The paper he had in front of him had multiple wrong answers, a lot of them, actually, which didn't fit with the Naruto who was now visiting the library of all places. When he heard Izumo tell him about that, Iruka had choked on the onigiri he was eating at the time. Naruto? The loudest person in the village, with the exception of Mato Guy and his new protege, although apparently Naruto had joined the duo in their training, was in a library? He was voluntarily studying? Iruka had, for a few days, chosen to interpret it as a good thing. It reinforced what he knew of Naruto's stubbornness to succeed, and everyone in the village knew of his ambition to become Hokage. Iruka was about ready to mark this paper an F, again, when he noticed what Naruto had written for the fifth question. The question itself was testing their understanding of basic Fuinjutsu, how to tell a real exploding tag from a fake one, how to tell how big a bang it would make when it went off, and several more advanced sections that were far beyond the level of understanding of Fuinjutsu that Konoha demanded of its genin. Naruto had put down an answer to all parts of the question, but he had also written some calculations, a small table of symbols and what seemed to be corresponding numbers, and he had even pointed out some flaws he had seen in the original question, with a cheeky comment in the margin about how Iruka should do his research better. Iruka hadn't even expected Sakura, his most academic student, to be able to answer this question. That was why he put it in the test to begin with. If this wasn't a sign that the world was about to end, Iruka would eat his Hittite. Sarutobi Hiruzen was enjoying a brief moment of peace in his office, puffing contentedly on his pipe, his eyes closed as he enjoyed the flavor of the tobacco. It was a good time to be an old man and a Hokage, really. The nations were largely stable, the balance of power was unlikely to change drastically anytime soon. Peace was good. It meant the shinobi and civilians under his care were less likely to encounter anything life-threatening in their daily lives. He sighed again, but not in contentment. Of course, that meant they were freer to engage in idiotic pursuits, like ostracizing Naruto. He was a good boy, if a little spirited, but recently he had been much more subdued. He had finally found friends, though. For that, Sarutobi was grateful. That boy had spent long enough on his own, and it was about time he found someone his own age he could talk with. A knock on his door distracted him. Yes, Hokage-sama, Yumino Iruka is here to see you. Iruka? Sandaime looked at the clock on his office wall. It was only just coming up on 4 p.m. What was so important Iruka had felt it necessary to rush straight here after the academy. Send him in. Iruka walked in, a piece of paper in his hand. So, what brings you here straight from the academy, Iruka-san? Iruka laid the paper, which Sarutobi now saw was a test paper, on his desk. Look at question 5. He picked up the sheet and did so. As his eyes scanned the text, both printed and written, his eyes widened. Answers like these required an understanding of the most advanced concepts of Fuinjutsu. Who could have? His eyes shot to the name at the top of the paper. Naruto wrote this. Iruka nodded. I was marking over lunch, and I had to spend the next period poring over Fuinjutsu technique scrolls just to understand some of what he was talking about, just so I could mark that one question. This is far beyond genin level, and with all respect to him, Hokage-sama, Naruto just shouldn't be able to understand this. I put that question in there expecting none of my students to answer it, and then he trailed off. Then Naruto gave you this answer? He paused, his brow furrowed in thought. I notice his handwriting is much improved as well. He had read Naruto's details required for the academy records. It was a miracle it was even legible. Iruka nodded. Do you think he's studying Fuinjutsu independently? I know he's been at the library a lot recently, Sarutobi grunted in response. His ANBU had told him as much, but he was pleased that someone else took as much of an interest in the boy's well-being. Is he still performing poorly in the academy? He's still dead last in the class. He works hard, but until this, I was just putting his failures down to an inability to focus. But that doesn't make sense, since he associates with Shikamaru and Chuji, who are, respectively, two of my best students in chakra theory and taijutsu. On a good day, Chuji's even been known to be a match for Sasuke. You would think some of that would rub off on him, or perhaps he's deliberately holding himself back in class. Hokage-sama, why would he do something like that? Sarutobi drummed his pipe to his chin. I don't know. Why he would hold himself back to dead last in his class, and risk losing his chance to even become a genin HM. There was a possibility, based on their marks. Who is the best on your class? Uchiha Sasuke. Iruka made the connection. You think Naruto's holding back to be on his team? But that doesn't make any sense either. He hates Sasuke. Sarutobi hummed. Perhaps that is the reason why he wants to be on his team. Having already identified Sasuke as a worthy rival, he wants as many chances as possible to test himself against the famed Uchiha prodigy. Personally, Iruka doubted that Naruto could be so shallow or petty as to target Sasuke purely because he was the famous Uchiha. Thank you for letting me know about this, Iruka-san. I trust you've discussed this with Naruto? No, Hokage-sama, not yet. I was planning on asking him over ramen tomorrow. I see. Well, let me know what his answer is, won't you? Iruka bowed and left. Once he was gone, Sarutobi started to think again, this time about Naruto. A knock on the door told Hyuga Hayashi that his daughter's taijutsu instructor had arrived for the monthly report. At a curt word from the clan head, she entered and sat formally before Hayashi. The woman was responsible for training the daughter of the clan head, so she was one of the best from the branch family. She taught the elder daughter, of course. Hayashi saw to Hanabi's training personally. Despite her current position as the unfavored daughter, Hinata was still a Hyuga, and she was still a member of the main family. Consequently, while her Jukin tutor was only a branch family member, it was still the best tutor available from that group. You may begin. Hayashi knew that the instructor understood what was expected of her during these meetings. They were a monthly occurrence. Hinata-sama is performing as well as can be expected of her, Hayashi-sama. Her technique and endurance improve steadily with every session, and the power behind those blows improves as well. However, I feel that she could be performing better. Hayashi looked up. Are you telling me my daughter is not applying herself properly? No, Hayashi-sama, that's not it. If anything, I think she's actually hiding her true ability. Explain. Sometimes, when we spar, Hinata-sama hesitates for a moment before my strike lands. I think she's reading my movements and then allowing my blow through her defenses. Hayashi's countenance did not change, but the instructor thought she could see a ghost of a frown flickering around the clan head's mouth. When using the Byakugan, I have also noticed that her chakra control seems to have improved far more than she admits to. The chakra bursts in her strikes are more precise, and her chakra reserves drain at a slower rate. Her tenketsu also appear to be more elastic than I would have suspected, which once again implies greatly improved chakra control. Hayashi sat deep in thought as he pondered the instructor's assessment of Hinata's abilities. While he may have forsaken his eldest daughter to some extent, she was still his daughter, and he still wished to know of her progress, to know if perhaps she had some chance, however bleak, of gaining strength enough to assume her expected place as head of the clan. Hayashi had not been comfortable with the arrangement at first, but he had quelled such misgivings by retreating behind the Hyuga mask of indifferent detachment and brutal logic. The clan head must embody the Hyuga tradition, as demanded by the clan elders. The Hyuga clan prided itself on being coldly unemotional, ruthlessly observant and masters of their Juken style. They were strong in their solitary nature, they were unassailable pillars of ability and self-discipline amongst the other, less capable village shinobi. At least, that was how every Hyuga should be, as demanded by the clan elders. By comparison, Hinata was a timid and open girl, being overly emotional at times and embarrassingly inept with the clan taijutsu, the Juken, to the point where she was not even a match for her younger sister. Whether or not this was due to a lack of skill with taijutsu or she was simply unable to bring herself to attack Hanabi in earnest mattered little. Both were examples of weakness in the elder's eyes, and as such she was unfit to rule the clan. Such an issue did not need to be resolved until the matter of his death, but given the unpredictable nature of the lives of shinobi, he was under increasing pressure from the elders to name a successor. He knew that no shinobi, no matter how skilled, really expected to live beyond the age of 60. Hayashi was barely half that. He doubted Minato would have had to put up with the village council pressuring him to name a successor by this age, had he lived, and they had been about the same age. Hayashi had, in an attempt to quiet the elders, sent away his weaker daughter to be trained solely by the academy and a small number of branch family retainers, such as the kunoichi kneeling before him now. It was an implicit statement of rejection, but since he had declared no explicit intentions to annihilate the elders' precious traditions, they had let it slide. Besides, if it meant they had a strong clan head, who cared about the circumstances, when she had been collected by a young red-eyed shunin, he had deliberately shown next to no regard for her well-being, or even for her existence. This was because Hayashi was a firm believer in leading by example, and he had hoped that such a display in front of both his daughters would be an effective demonstration of how the Hyuga clan had needed to act, how they had to place the good of the entire clan before their own personal needs, even the needs of those close to them. Unfortunately, it had only seemed to make Hinata even more insular, and the lack of outside contact had continued to make her emotional state embarrassingly easy to read. Once she did not think her father cared, either. She seemed to have lost the drive to succeed in her lessons, to prove her ability to him in their training sessions. But now, if Hinata was hiding her true ability, from both her instructors and her own father, that was unacceptable. She needed to be as strong as possible, and openly so, were she to have any chance of assuming her proper place within the clan. And really, Hayashi would prefer to avoid the headache that would ensue should his chosen heir prove lacking under the elders' renewed scrutiny. After these few moments of terse thought, "You are certain of this?" "I have only suspicions, Hayashi-sama. I believed you should be made aware of them, considering the complicated circumstances." Hayashi did not, then, activate her bird seal to teach her respect for two reasons. The first was that, despite how insolently any other elder would have chosen to interpret her statement, Hayashi was aware that the entire clan knew of the situation surrounding his successor, and that she had told him of her suspicions regarding Hinata only suggested that she had an excellent grasp of the situation. Hayashi did not want to discourage the very traits that the Hyuga prided themselves on, specifically, keen observation and the intelligence to correctly analyze those observations. The second was out of respect for his brother. Hayashi had used that damned seal only thrice in his entire life, and only once following his brother's death. Very well. You are to continue in her instruction as you have done. If your suspicions do not abate after she has graduated, or if she does not reveal that she has been holding back, you are to test her in sparring. Hayashi-sama, if she is as accomplished as you suspect her to be, then come at her in progressive levels of ability. Then report any disparity between displayed ability and what she should be capable of to me. It was an underhanded move, but they were shinobi, and Hinata's future depended on being as good as possible, as obviously as possible. The instructor bowed. "Hi, Hayashi-sama, you may leave." The original Inoshikacho trio were in a bar, drinking together, as such good drinking buddies would, nay, should be doing on a Friday night. All three of them, unfortunately, had other things on their mind that prevented them from enjoying the booze to its fullest extent. It was Shikaku, arguably the lazy one, who spoke first. "Hey Chuza, have you noticed any odd behavior in Chuji?" "Heh. You mean besides advancing in his taijutsu a lot faster than I could have ever expected?" Shikaku stared. "Or perhaps you're referring to the change in his personality? He used to be a very gentle, naive boy and that's still there, But he also seems a lot more intense, far more driven, like he has an unattainable goal. Chuza looked sad for a moment. I'm glad that he's this devoted to improving his skills, but I'm worried for him. Despite the fact that he's going to be a genin soon, Chuji's still young. He should be acting like it, not like this. I'm worried for my son, Shikaku. Taking a sip from his sake, Chuza sighed. Inoichi took up the slack. Why do you ask anyway? Is something wrong concerning Shikamaru? Maybe. He hesitated long enough to take a drink. Yoshino was going through his things the other day, and I know, she's so troublesome sometimes, he added at seeing his teammates' shocked expressions, but she found a technique scroll on Genjutsu under his bed. I don't mean under the bed frame, either, I mean it was physically stuck beneath the mattress, like a porno mag. He doesn't have any of those, by the way. Inoichi and Chuza both grinned at this. Anyway, she took a look at this scroll, then she took it to me, since her specialty is herbs and wildlife and such. Of course, my specialty is ninjutsu, and until now I didn't know Shikamaru was even interested in genjutsu. He paused, taking another sip to help him think. He'd annotated the scroll, as well. Some parts were crossed out, and he'd left his own corrections there. What's so strange about that? It just means the author didn't really do their research. Okay, while it's not my strong point, my understanding of genjutsu is about equal to that of a chunin specialist's. The contents of this scroll, and the corrections made by Shikamaru, by my 12-year-old son who isn't even a genin yet, confounded the hell out of me. Inoichi took a hard swig from his dish. So, I take it to the author thinking, maybe they'll be able to explain what my son's talking about. I don't tell them that my son's the one who made those corrections, of course. Who was the author? Yuhi Kurinai. Who? They both asked. The genjutsu specialist. She made jounin a few months back. With the red eyes? Shikaku nodded. So, what did she tell you? She wrote that scroll just before she made special jounin. She admitted there were a few mistakes in it, that she wished she could go back and correct, but she was pleased that whoever had read it had picked up on those. She also told me that it was written as an intellectual exercise to help her get to grips with jounin-level genjutsu theory. Chuza accidentally broke his sake dish. My son is studying and comprehending genjutsu at jounin level, and he's also keeping this from the rest of the village, and me, quite successfully. Which means he could be progressing at a rate comparable to Uchiha Itachi and Hatake Kakashi. I don't know whether to be scared, proud, or both. The three sat in shocked silence for a while, which was broken when Inoichi snorted. Oh, that must be terrible, Shikaku. Your son could be a prodigy. I'll trade your paternal worries for mine, any? He seemed a little drunk. Do you know what's the most intellectual topic Ino's talked about at home since she went to the academy? Basic chakra control. She asked us to show her tips to improve her chakra control and the speed of her seals, and that was just so she could show up some other girl in class in front of Sasuke-kun. There was disgruntled emphasis on the Uchiha's honorific. She's 12. She should not be worrying about that right now, about boys. She should be focusing on graduating, like Chuji, and like Shikamaru, and like her precious Sasuke-kun. Don't get me wrong, he added, I love my daughter. Nothing will ever change that. But for once, just once, I wish she would show an interest in the ninja arts beyond an underlying desire to impress a boy. A boy who, from Yumino-san's assessment, displays little more than contempt for her, and that's on a good day. She's a preteen girl, Inoichi. From what I understand, most of her female classmates seem enamored with the Uchiha kid. Chuza nodded in agreement. Yeah, except for that Hyuga girl that Chuji told me about. The other two didn't know about this. Yeah, apparently a girl called Hinata who sometimes associates with them, but from what Chuji tells me, she's a bit shy. A shy Hyuga? Kami, will wonders never cease? Oh, I don't know. Chuji also tells me he and Shikamaru have made friends with the Uzumaki kid. Inoichi did a spit take. The demon brat? There's no evidence he's a demon, Inoichi. It was Shikaku who first spoke in the boy's defense. There's no evidence he isn't. Has he ever accessed the special chakra? Has he ever exhibited any unpatriotic behavior? Chuza asked. He's got its spirit inside of him. You two don't work with purely spiritual energy. You don't know what kind of an effect something like that would have on a kid's mind. If Igi was capable of influencing him like you think it is, do you really think he wouldn't be Bakuano insane and killing everyone he meets by now? Shikaku, of course, was arguing from a logical standpoint. According to Chuji, the boy's passionate and quite friendly. He's also very determined. I doubt we're in any threat from the you-know-what so long as he stays that way. Inoichi could hardly believe his ears. His friends didn't think the Kyuubi brat was a threat? Were they not there, 12 years ago? Inoichi. We know that you're a specialist in messing with minds and how minds can be messed with. We weren't surprised when you took up genjutsu. Actually, my clan's hijutsu are a form of combination technique. It's not really that different from what I usually do, right? Regardless, it was the yandame who made that kid's seal. We once fought under him, remember? He'd never do anything to endanger the village, and if that kid was a danger, he'd have told the sandame to kill the boy instead of protect him. I don't know about you, Inoichi, but I'm just willing enough to place my trust in the word of two Hokages. Hinata awoke, stretching out and reveling in the warmth of her bed. Instinctively, her hand reached across the bedding to find no one else. Her mood was shattered as waking up brought with it the biting grasp of reality. Naruto wasn't here, nor would he, for quite some time. She hated this. She had been happy with Naruto. He had finally realized how she felt, and he had returned those feelings eagerly. It wasn't quite easy, though. The only real breakthrough had come on an extended investigation mission with him. One night, she found him speaking aloud to the full moon, as though it was the only figure that wouldn't judge him any differently. She had spoken with him, on that rooftop, and when he asked her if she knew what day it was, she had answered, without hesitation, that it was his birthday. He had smiled at that. Apparently she was the first person to remember his birthday before remembering the Yandame's death. When they returned to the village, Naruto had treated her to Ichiraku's in celebration of a successful mission. He had all but insisted when she revealed she had never had Ichiraku's before. For weeks later, he revealed the nature of his stomach seal to her. She wasn't afraid. She knew him, and he was not the QB. She told him as much, and then, finally, confessed her love. That was her first kiss, and she had loved it, just as she loved him. She smiled. Things had gone much better for them from there. He had even been such a gentleman about the physical side of their relationship. Never pressured her, never even touched on the subject, except once, when he had asked her if she resented him for not making a move in that area. She had rather emphatically denied that. After they were married, she found out why he had been so accepting of their celibacy. He had wanted to make sure that her first time was fantastic. Didn't do it justice, she thought, flushing. Their wedding night had been. She shivered as those wonderful memories came flooding back. She shook her head as she tried to force them back out of her mind. She had that to look forward to, and knowing Naruto, he was going to make sure it was even better. She sighed, thinking of all th. She then realized what she was thinking about. This was not an acceptable train of thought for a lady, especially not one as young as she. Her Naruto-kun had been sent back with her to these bodies, and they had quite a bit of growth to go through before they should even think about that. Growth, she thought Naruto had quite a lot of growth coming to him. She caught herself before she blushed again. But they still had so long to go, right? Stop that, subconscious, you're doing this on purpose, before they could even appear to be a couple. Until then, she would have to endure the absence of her Naruto's warm, comforting presence next to her, as she slept. She hated this, she thought, as she pulled herself out of bed for another day. Iruka was dreading this, despite the happy facade he put on for his class. After he dismissed them, he was going to treat Naruto to Ichiraku's, which would be a front to get as many answers out of the boy as he could. After reviewing the basics of Bunshin no Jutsu, a horrendously useless technique save for the chakra control that practicing it would bring, Iruka dismissed the class and told them to practice at home. Naruto, would you mind staying behind, please? I'd like to talk to you about your test. There was some snickering from other students, and Iruka felt a small amount of guilt at Naruto's forced smile, but clarifying the matter by announcing the real problem in front of the class would simply encourage rumors that Naruto was cheating. Once everyone else was gone, Iruka brought out the test. Naruto cursed internally. That damn test. It was probably question 5 he wanted to talk about. Naruto had been feeling no small amount of pride at how quickly he had relearned Fuinjutsu in this time, and he just couldn't resist answering to the best of his ability. Question 5, in particular, was of some interest. He knew it. A genuinely embarrassed grin appeared. Well, I guess I don't really know as much as I thought I did, then. On the contrary, your answer was of a level that I had to do extra research on the subject just to mark it. He replaced the sheet in his desk, and smiled warmly. I think this deserves something, wouldn't you? How about some Ichirakus for good work? Naruto's surprise was wonderful, First I need to let Lee and his sensei know. Lee? Naruto nodded. Yeah? He's my friend, and he graduated last year. He introduced me to his sensei, and now they help me with my taijutsu after school. Hey, could they come along if they wanted? Iruka nodded, smiling. So, Naruto had another friend, did he? Iruka was honestly happy for him. Guy and Lee had declined the offer, claiming that this was an achievement they had no part of. It was Naruto's independent hard work that had gained him this celebration, and they did not want to intrude on his relationship with Iruka. Naruto apologized for missing this practice, and Guy laughed in his typical jovial fashion. He said Naruto could make it up by working even harder tomorrow. Chuji was delighted to hear that his best customer had shown up the rest of his class, even if they would never know. Their ramen was served with an even toothier smile than usual. It was when Naruto was halfway through his second bowl that Iruka started on the questions. So, Guy's teaching you taijutsu? How did that happen? I made friends with Lee in his last year, and Naruto proceeded to tell him about the bullies, then about Lee's rather sudden insistence that his academy friend train with him and his sensei. My taijutsu's really got better too. Guy's a much better taijutsu teacher than Mizuki-sensei. Iruka smiled. Mizuki would likely be ecstatic about his skill being compared to someone as accomplished as Mado Guy, even if it was in Naruto's context. His next question proved slightly less natural, but it was why he'd brought Naruto here. Naruto, how did you know that much about Fuinjutsu? As far as I can tell, it's a very obscure and altogether complicated branch of ninjutsu. Naruto shrugged. Well, I found a few scrolls on it, and it looked fun, so I kept trying it. It's all about solving problems, and it just feels like a big puzzle, except you sometimes have to make the pieces yourself. Iruka nodded at his explanation. Naruto excelled at thinking outside of the box, as he constantly demonstrated in physical tests, and Fuinjutsu required a lot of that. Naruto was always able to find the loophole that no one else thought of, even before his sudden scholarly change. Well, you seem quite good at it. Following what you said about Guy, it makes me wonder how good you are in other fields. There was no easy way to ask this, so Iruka decided to hell with it. Naruto would prefer a direct question anyway. Naruto, are you holding yourself back in class? The atmosphere instantly turned quiet. Naruto had even stopped slurping his noodles, the long, starchy strands hanging out of his mouth. He bit them off and swallowed as he nodded silently. But why? If you're that capable with Fuinjutsu, you should be so much better with everything else than you have been. This didn't make any sense. Naruto was constantly looking for acknowledgement, so why would he just turn around and throw away his best chance for that doing well in his studies? Naruto, you know about the tradition of pairing the best and last in the class when they form the genin teams, right? Another nod. Naruto could feel a small lump in his throat, and didn't trust himself to speak. He could tell that Iruka was having trouble trying to understand this. Are you holding back so you can be in Sasuke's team? Or maybe not. Naruto did not want to hide any more than necessary from Iruka-sensei, the first person to really acknowledge him, so he did what he did best. He told the truth. Yes. Iruka looked disappointed, but Naruto couldn't think why. Why are you looking at me like that? Because I honestly thought you were a better person than that, Naruto. What? Apparently you've become just as taken with the Uchiha mania that's gripped the rest of the village. Do you really think that beating Sasuke, or even just being on his team, will make people recognize you? No. Naruto looked so angry that Iruka wondered if maybe he just insulted him. Iruka-sensei, how many friends does Sasuke have? He has lots, doesn't he? Iruka paused. Yeah, he's always got a small crowd following him in. That's not it. Naruto snapped. He had never snapped at Iruka before, and the surprise was visible on his face. That's not what I asked, Iruka-sensei. I didn't ask how many admirers, or followers, or well-wishers or fangirls or sympathizers or even people just blatantly trying to exploit him. I asked how many friends he has. How many people who are willing to spend time with him because he's Uchiha Sasuke, with his own hopes, dreams, hobbies and goals, and not because he's Uchiha Sasuke, famous last prodigy of the Uchiha clan and their damned Sharingan. How many? Naruto looked really worked up about this, and Iruka was ashamed to admit he'd misjudged him. Iruka knew what the answer was. He suspected that Naruto did too. We've crossed paths a few times outside of the academy. Every time, he was on his own. No followers, no fangirls, no one. I started to realize that the village has built up this idealized image of him. That image, that status as something to be idolized and treasured, means that he's been put up on a pedestal. He doesn't have any friends, any people who are willing to acknowledge him for who he is, instead of what he is, what he represents. Iruka's blood almost ran cold. It was starting to sound like Naruto was drawing parallels between himself and Sasuke. Did Naruto know about the Kyuubi? I think he's the best in the academy, so cold in the academy, because he wants people to judge him based on his own skill and ability. But the more he succeeds, the more he's playing to their image of him as Konoha's wonderful genius. He wants to be acknowledged for who he is. He's just like me. As he looked upon the boy who now slumped exhausted on his stool, Iruka felt guilty, ashamed, and embarrassed all at once for ever doubting that Naruto would do what he thought was right. He was holding back in class to get on Sasuke's team, yes, but not for recognition or fame by association. He was doing so because he thought he saw in Sasuke a kindred spirit. Someone who, like him, was ostracized from the rest of the village for circumstances beyond their control, and had people recognize them for those circumstances rather than their own ability. Naruto for the Kyuubi, and the Yandame's death. Sasuke for his blood-soaked lineage. Iruka then realized that was the reason for his animosity in class. He was letting Sasuke know that he wouldn't acknowledge him for his family name, or his reputation or anything else other than his own qualities. Iruka suddenly felt a great surge of pride for the deflated young Hokage to be sitting next to him, and was possessed of an unshakable certainty that Naruto would one day attain his ambition. He noticed that Chuji and his daughter had been listening to Naruto's speech with interest, and not a little. They even had some tears welling up. Naruto! Iruka was distracted by a loud man standing right behind him. How had he not noticed him? He turned around, and identified the green jumpsuits that heralded Mado Guy and his student, Rock Lee. The man was openly crying, as was his much shorter protege in matching clothes. The sight was made even more ridiculous by the fact that they were both in a handstand. Guy-sensei? Lee? What are you doing here? Guy answered him through tears and sniffling. I was running laps through Konoha on my hands to atone for my most recent loss against my eternal rival, and Lee volunteered to follow me. We passed by this most youthful ramen stand as you were beginning your speech, and he flipped back onto his feet, his forearm brought up to stem the flow of the tears. It didn't work, and Lee, following his beloved sensei's example, was back on his feet and continuing the tale, his fist held trembling underneath his face. We were so passionately moved by your youthful words, Naruto-kun. I understand that we should not have eavesdropped, but we could not help it. Your words kept us from departing, even as they overflowed with the power of your youth. Guy had recovered by now, and together they struck their nice guy pose, the collective shine from their teeth visible through their passionately flowing tears of youthful joy. To sacrifice your own glory for the sake of another. Naruto. You truly understand what it means to possess the burning power of youth, and I am proud to call you my student alongside Lee. Iruka chuckled lightly as Naruto rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Thanks, Guy-sensei. Naruto, in tribute to your burning youth, we will all train twice as hard, starting tomorrow. Guy-sensei, we should try and train 3 times as hard. That way Naruto-kun and I will unlock our potentials even sooner. Naruto was sweating at this point, and Iruka wondered if he would be able to survive that increased pace. Yosh. Good thinking, Lee. Alright, Naruto, this may seem sudden, but from tomorrow onwards we will be working 5 times as hard. Guy threw back his head and laughed as loudly as he usually did. But Guy-sensei, we stopped doing laps on our hands. We must do something to atone for that right away. That's right. Very well then, we shall run 700 more laps around Konoha on our hands, then perform 500 push-ups at the top of the Hokage monument. Right on cue, their stomachs growled angrily. All on an empty stomach. Guy-sensei, Lee, Guy-sensei, Lee, let's go. They shouted as one, flipped back onto their hands and sped off while shouting, for the springtime of youth, leaving behind 2 amused civilians, one very amused Chunin, and one shinobi in training who was wondering just how much he was going to hurt tomorrow. Yumino Iruka, to see you again, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi nodded, and the Chunin was let into his office. Before he could say anything, Iruka had asked a very strange question. Did you know that Naruto is receiving taijutsu tutoring alongside Rock Lee, Guy's student? No, I didn't. His ANBU had, for some reason, decided that was not important, or perhaps had assumed that Guy would tell the Hokage himself. Why do you ask? It's because Lee is very friendly with him. They first met when Naruto tried to help him fight off some bullies last year in the academy. Sarutobi chuckled. That was something his ANBU had told him about. Lee had been quite emphatic in his declaration of friendship. But that was not the real issue. You've spoken with Naruto regarding his discrepancies, I assume? Yes. What did he tell you? Well, first he asked me something. How many friends do you think Uchiha Sasuke has, Hokage-sama? Sarutobi looked a little confused, but Iruka rarely repeated questions without a reason. He decided to humor him, and let him make his point. I was given to understand that Sasuke is quite popular, both in the village and the academy. Iruka nodded. That's how I answered as well. Then Naruto asked me how many friends Sasuke has. Isn't that? How many friends? Not how many admirers, sympathizers, followers, well-wishers, fangirls, or even just people blatantly trying to exploit him, was how Naruto put it. People who are willing to spend time with him because he is Uchiha Sasuke, shinobi in training with his own goals and fears, and not because he is Uchiha Sasuke, last prodigy of the Uchiha clan and survivor of the Sharingan. It was all Sarutobi could do not to gape. That was a damn good point, and one he'd honestly never noticed before. Naruto asked this, almost word for word. I'm ashamed to admit I didn't realize what he was telling me until then. So, Naruto and Sasuke are more alike than we realized, both of them, alone for something they had no control over. Which is why Naruto is holding himself back. He is trying to get on Sasuke's team, but not for the glory or fame by association he might get. He sees a kindred spirit in Sasuke, and he's loath to let him be stuck with a team who'll treat him with hero worship. Well then, for the sake of young Uchiha's ego, I think it would not be too grievous an oversight to let Naruto continue as he has done. The 2 men shared a quick, knowing glance before Sarutobi slipped back into professional mode. I've received visits from concerned parents of 3 of your students. Oh, firstly, Hyuga Hayashi wishes to know what progress his daughter has made in your class. Iruka couldn't keep a small scowl off his face. He was well aware of Hayashi's conspicuous lack of interest in his daughter's life until now. Why now, Iruka? The Chunin sighed. It was unprofessional to bear such hostility towards a student's parent, even if neglect was neglect. Hi. She is still somewhat distant from her classmates, though I don't believe she is quite as timid as before. I have seen her speaking with others, and despite how little time she spends around them, it is a good deal more than my other students. I think it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to call them her friends. Who are they? Uzumaki Naruto, Akimichi Chuji, and Nara Shikamaru. That merited an oddly pensive expression. Her marks have improved in much the same way as the rest of the class, though she's typically quite high in the rankings when it comes to chakra control exercises. Sarutobi nodded. So, you don't think there has been any significant change in her character or abilities? No, Hokage-sama. Then, who are the other 2 students you've been asked about? Akimichi Chuji and Nara Shikamaru. So that was the reason for the pensive expression. What were the nature of the complaints? Not complaints, strictly speaking. Shikaku was worried that his son is concealing his true ability, and Chuza thought that Chuji had perhaps experienced some undue stress, since he is behaving rather strangely. Well, Shikamaru has actually begun making an effort in class, and he's got a very good grasp of most of the syllabus. Chuji, well, he's certainly more aggressive in his taijutsu, but I haven't really seen any huge changes. Sarutobi hummed. Do you think it's relevant that the students who seem to be at the center of this, whatever this is, know each other? It's possible. However, knowing Naruto, I refuse to believe that this is, in any way, detrimental to Konoha. He sighed. We'll just have to watch their future progress very closely. Dismissed. Iruka bowed, then left through the door. Sarutobi sat back and dragged on his pipe. So, Naruto was proving to be more observant than anyone would have previously given him credit. If his ability in Fuinjutsu was anything to go by, he was almost certainly far more accomplished than his academy scores indicated. Perhaps even good enough to be a rival for the Uchiha. Sarutobi was grateful that he had been correct that Naruto had been holding back, but for different reasons than he had anticipated. If this continued, perhaps he could call off the ANBU who were following him, or at the very least, he could do so earlier than he originally planned. On the other hand, if that was the case, then he was progressing at a phenomenal rate, and one that, quite frankly, scared the Sandaime Hokage. The last shinobi he knew to progress as quickly were his genin team, they who would eventually become the Sannin. Of course, they had only progressed as quickly after they had graduated. It was also a mystery as to why Nara Shikamaru, Akimichi Chuji and Hyuga Hinata were involved. If their parents' assumptions were correct, they too were progressing quickly, but for some reason chose not to call attention to it. Humility and a reserved nature were both boons to a shinobi, but to that degree? Sarutobi didn't realize that his pipe had gone out a few minutes ago, and he was just chewing on the mouthpiece. He could easily relied at using a simple katan technique, but he was too wrapped up in his thoughts to even consider it. He doubted that Naruto, or any of his friends, for it was his friends who were involved in this, and strangely, no one else, would tell him if he just asked them. If it was detrimental to the village, and Sarutobi shuddered at the thought that so many could be turned against Konoha already, then they were not likely to tell him about it. If it wasn't detrimental to the village, then he knew they would not reveal anything, as it wasn't a threat. Once they graduated, he could simply order them to tell him, but that would be an abuse of his power that he wasn't comfortable with. So really, all he could do was wait for one of them to approach him. Sarutobi felt very old just then, as he realized that all he could do to put his mind at rest was to wait. For one class at the Konoha Ninja Academy, it was a very special day today. It was today that would decide whether or not they would join the world of shinobi, and in the village's eyes, become adults. Today would decide if they were capable to become genin. Today was their graduation test. Naruto's familiar grin was in place as he fixed his goggles for what would be the last time. Today he would pass, though by unorthodox means, and more, he would learn the technique that would eventually define his entire repertoire of ninjutsu. Of course, he already knew Kage Bunshin, but he was a little bit rusty after not using it for 2 years. Regardless, he knew the technique already, it was just a matter of making sure this body could use it, which meant he could spend a little more time on the rest of the scroll. There had to be 1 or 2 techniques in there that he could learn. All of this, of course, depended on the final exam being the Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto cringed. That was something of a sore point. No matter how good his chakra control had become in the future, no matter how focused or determined he was to make it work, regular old Bunshin no Jutsu was something he had never mastered, and never would. Kage Bunshin were easy for him. Just one hand seal, a quick squeeze of chakra, and he could pop out a couple dozen without even breaking a sweat. His record so far, not counting some instances where he'd later suffered from chakra exhaustion, was around 3,000 fully autonomous Kage Bunshin, and that was if he concentrated for a few seconds. He never actually used that many in combat, but it was reassuring to know you were literally able to call up a small army at a moment's notice. He could even create exploding clones. He'd at least managed to steal one technique from Itachi, but normal, illusionary Bunshin? Nope. Not a one. Well, not a convincing one, anyway, and Naruto honestly couldn't figure out why. He'd had enough chakra control to create the Rasengan, and later, the Rasen Shuriken, one-handed. But no matter how hard he tried, no matter how little chakra he let drip into the technique, he could never create a satisfactory Bunshin. Hell, he couldn't even make one that could stand up. So, in all, he was ready to fail this genin exam. It was all he could do to remind himself that passing this exam was not the primary objective, and that in order for Mizuki to reveal himself as a traitor, he needed to give him an opportunity to do so. Like fail the exam. Naruto sighed as he walked out his door, ready for what would never be surpassed as his most humiliating moment, failing to create even a single Bunshin in front of his entire class. Hinata swallowed the lump in her throat without success. The graduation exam had exactly the same intimidating atmosphere as last time. If she was unable to pass, she would be disowned by the clan, and be forced to find work as a civilian. Objectively, she knew there was no chance of that ever happening, especially this time around. However, her underlying nerves, as well as her defeatist side of voice she never could silence, completely suggested that maybe she was deluding herself. Maybe, this time, they had noticed her odd behavior and made the test more difficult. She'd had similar thoughts the first time around as well, if only for the reason that she was a Hyuga, and more importantly, the daughter of Hyuga Hayashi. She had thought that maybe her father had requested her exam be made more difficult, that she might be truly tested in her ability. That had been untrue, of course. Her father had never even shown any interest beyond her rank in class. Obviously, Uchiha Sasuke had dominated the marking, but she had still finished in the top third of her class. Unfortunately, that still meant that there were about 9 people between her and the top spot. Her father had dismissed her completely at that point. She shook her head quickly to dispel these traitorous thoughts. She would pass. She had passed last time, and she would pass now. She was not going to try her best, she was going to do her best, at least within the realms of non-suspicion. Not yet, she chided herself. She couldn't go all out with her abilities yet, for her cousin's sake. She still had to present this weak, timid facade until the Chunin exams. Not yet. By the end of the day, most of the class were either elated or anxious, which was no real change from that morning. The only difference was who was elated or anxious. Some students had performed better than they had expected to, while others had watched their peers perform better than they. Ultimately, cautious optimism was the rule of the day, and now it was the final part of the exam. Chakra theory and taijutsu had been dealt with earlier in the day. Now was the moment of truth for many, the quality which was the defining point of a shinobi. Anyone could fight with fists, or understand, at least intellectually, how chakra worked and interacted with the body. But only a true ninja, the true elite, could mold that chakra and perform ninjutsu. And it was going to be so easy too. Bunshin no Jutsu? They'd all mastered that months ago. Well, most of them had. Hinata turned to Naruto, several rows ahead of her, openly worried for him. If Naruto had a weakness in his ninjutsu, this was it. Techniques which required so little chakra to work that he was incapable of bleeding off the required amount. For a shinobi who didn't have chakra reserves as expansive as he did, Bunshin no Jutsu was easy, and provided a small measure of chakra control for students. It was a technique intended to give prospective ninja a taste for molding and controlling chakra, and had little real use outside of a classroom. She wondered if the people responsible for the exam knew that, and had chosen this technique for the final exam specifically to deny Naruto from gaining his Hittite. Her frown was still on her face as her name was called, and she walked down to the front to perform it. She caught Naruto's eye on the way down, and he gave her a reassuring wink. It was not her intention to produce 4 red-faced Bunshin whose blushes were all identical to her own, but they still passed her the exam. Naruto stood up with a lead ball in his stomach. Despite the cheeky facade he'd put up for his friend's sake, Naruto was anxious. He was confident that Mizuki would reveal his true colors once he failed the exam, but at the end of the day, he was still entrusting his future to the actions of a traitor. Mizuki might not even care in this timeline. He might have given up on his stupid scheme out of caution, or regret, or who knows what. He and his friends might have altered things to the point that Mizuki wouldn't approach him. Oh Kami, that question. That damned question 5. Had Iruka shown it to Mizuki, who then thought better of trying to trick a genin with such an intimidating comprehension of Fuinjutsu? Did he even care? Did he have his own means of obtaining the scroll this time? Naruto forced himself to calm down. Even if Mizuki's plans had changed, that just meant he'd have to change his own to match them. He already knew Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, and ultimately, this was just a rank test. A rank test with so much riding on it. Team 7, Jiraiya, the Chunin exams. Oh Kami, Gaara. The invasion. No. Stop thinking about what might happen. What could be. Focus on the present, and deal with it from there. If things have changed irrevocably, simply from my being here, then well, I'm no worse off than I was first time around, am I? Naruto focused on the technique. He formed the necessary seals, molded the smallest amount of chakra he possibly could, and Iruka's grimace as he watched Naruto completely misfire the Bunshin no Jutsu was not entirely unsympathetic. The 3 off-color clones wouldn't fool a fool. One was standing up, but its legs were shaky, and after a few moments, it completely dissipated. The other 2 were lying on the ground, utterly hopeless. One of them was drooling. Then they, too, vanished in a puff of sickly sweet vapor, leaving the original with a worried frown across his face. Iruka shook his head to himself. If Naruto was really holding himself back to get on Sasuke's team, well, he could understand fudging his marks in class. But why would he intentionally fail the exam? He'd never even be on any team, let alone Sasuke's. Mizuki turned to Iruka. The other Chunin had been a friend of Iruka's from childhood, and while he sometimes exuded frustration with some of his students, he'd trust him to the ends of the earth. He spoke kindly, likely to spare Naruto's feelings in the face of such an embarrassing performance. Well, technically, he did produce 3 Bunshin Iruka. We could pass him. Naruto's face didn't change from his worried frown. Iruka knew Naruto was thinking of what he told the older Chunin a few weeks ago. Did he think that Iruka thought he was still holding back? No, he'd seen that look on Naruto's face before. That really had been his best attempt at the technique, but if that was the case, Iruka really didn't have any choice. Naruto, you fail. Inwardly, Mizuki smirked. As he had expected, the demon brat had failed the exam, despite Iruka's suspicions that he was far more capable than he let on. Iruka so damn predictable. Of course he wouldn't let the demon pass without a good score. He was far too attached to it, and wouldn't let it go out into the world unless he was certain it could take care of itself. Of course it could, it was a bloody demon. Yet still, Iruka refused to see the truth about the demon host. It was a demon. Simple. Uncomplicated. Fact. No matter how much that old fool and Iruka insisted otherwise, that wasn't going to change. But at least he could get some use out of the creature, and hey, maybe even do Konoha a favor before he left. They were weak, but still, they'd managed to produce him, hadn't they? Some small part, some very, very small part of Mizuki felt a twinge of regret for what he was about to do to the village where he grew up, but maybe getting rid of the demon would shut his conscience up. Putting on his best warm smile, reserved for weaklings and fools, he approached the demon sitting on a swing. At Naruto it looked up. Mizuki had to give the demon credit for this, at least. It was almost as good an actor as he was. If he didn't know any better, he'd have said that pained look was genuine. Don't hold it against Iruka. He pushes you this hard because he wants to make sure you're as good as you can be. He paused. He sees himself in you, you know. He grew up alone too. Because of you, you demon brat, he wanted to say, but he wisely refrained. You know, there is another way for you to become a genin. Naruto was ecstatic as he sped through the forest to the place that Mizuki had told him about, the scroll strapped tightly onto his back. Things had gone just as they had last time, but he was going to give Mizuki an even bigger pounding this time. But for now, he had to relearn Kagebunshin, to make sure he could still use it, and then, maybe learn another technique as well. He had 3 hours with the scroll, and the mind of a Hokage to put to use deciphering its contents. Here's to you, Mizuki-sensei, you lying, traitorous, son of a bitch. Naruto sat, unfurling the scroll in front of him as he did so. There, the very first technique, was Kagebunshin no Jutsu. Unraveling it further would likely reveal more Kenjutsu, but Naruto wasn't interested in them, for the moment. Yosh! Let's see, what to learn. Well, first things first, I guess. Naruto stood up, rereading the instructions for Kagebunshin no Jutsu thoroughly. Nodding, he formed the seal, and molded the necessary chakra for just one Kagebunshin. Kagebunshin no Jutsu. A loud bang, and a poof of smoke later, and there, standing next to him, was a perfect double. He poked it, just to be sure. Yep, good and solid. Both Narutos cheered and did a little jig. He hadn't really thought he'd forget how to perform this technique, but it was better to be sure. The Kagebunshin vanished after that, and Naruto sat down to give the scroll a thorough once-over, maybe to find something new that he could use. Yeah, okay, right. Who the hell came up with that one? After a half-hour going through the scroll, Naruto discovered that he was really quite fortunate. With a few exceptions, Kagebunshin was the least gut-turning technique in there. Some of these techniques had been sealed away with good reason. One of the nastier ones had the explicit purpose of turning an enemy inside out. But there were some that were only sealed because of chakra requirement, and looked to be your standard combat ninjutsu. Naruto's grin was absolutely feral as he came across a futon technique, and by the looks of it, a scarily powerful one. Daitatsumaki no Jutsu S-rank ninjutsu stolen from Tsunagekure, probably by Kakashi. Seal's effect, he was right. This was a frighteningly powerful technique, and one that he would definitely be practicing afterwards. Naruto stood, and went through the seals for a weaker version, intended to prepare for the real thing. The proper Daitatsumaki covered a humongous area, and he wasn't ready to be caught like that just yet. He still needed to master it on a smaller scale anyway, which, even though it wasn't named in the scroll, would still be a potent ninjutsu in its own right. He considered naming it himself, if he couldn't find it anywhere else. Naruto shook his head as he practiced the seals for each tier of the technique, without molding the chakra, so he didn't accidentally set it off. The chakra required for each of the techniques sealed in this scroll was immense. Mizuki was insane if he thought he could master even one of these techniques. Oh right, Mizuki is insane. Mizuki grinned as he came to where he knew the demon would be. He told it about the place, after all. It had managed to get the scroll without any problems, thanks to Mizuki's little distraction for the NBU. It had even managed to get it open. Mizuki was surprised there weren't any traps on the scroll. That was what the demon's role in this had been, after all. Let it trip any booby traps on the scroll, then Mizuki could swoop in and snag the, now safe, scroll without any problems. But now the demon was reading the scroll and learning some of the techniques. Mizuki snarled. Those were his techniques, damn it. How dare the demon try and master them itself? Mizuki was going to kill the brat anyway, but now he was going to enjoy it. Not that he wouldn't have enjoyed it before, however, he was too slow in revealing himself, and Iruka appeared on the scene. Mizuki was honestly surprised. He hadn't expected this level of competence from Iruka, that he was able to find the demon brat. Now he and the demon were arguing, and from the look on Iruka's face, it was telling the weak Chunin about his involvement. Oh well, Mizuki thought as he drew a hand of kunai. Looks like they both get to die. Naruto dove to the side almost simultaneous to Iruka, forcefully shoving him in the same direction. Realizing that Naruto was moving on his own, Iruka used some of his original force to move himself out of the way, too. The hail of kunai that followed didn't wound Iruka quite as badly as it had the first time around. Mizuki had made himself known, and was perched atop a tree branch. I'm surprised you knew about this place. He ignored Iruka's belated comprehension of the situation, and returned his attention to his original objective. Naruto. Hand over the scroll. The first time around, Naruto had been just a tad naive about the whole thing. He'd still been viewing Mizuki as his sensei, a figure of authority and respect. Taking into account Mizuki's attitude towards him in the final days at the academy, he really had been. Consequently, young Naruto's mind couldn't quite grasp the concept that he'd been used until Iruka had spelled it out for him. This time, however, Naruto knew who and what Mizuki really was. Naruto also knew himself, and what was sealed behind his navel. This Naruto was also sick of playing dumb. Iruka pulled out the kunai in his leg. Naruto hadn't responded, so he imagined he must have been in shock that Mizuki, of all people, could have betrayed Konoha. Naruto, don't let Mizuki get that scroll no matter WH. I know. Both Chunin stared at him. What? Even if I was going to anyway, he just attacked you, Iruka-sensei. Mizuki is no friend of Konoha. He patted the scroll on his back, his face uncharacteristically grim. So he's not getting this. As Naruto expected, this infuriated Mizuki to no small degree. He still persisted with his original plan, though. Naruto wasn't sure if Mizuki was being cunning or just desperate. Naruto, Iruka's afraid of you having that scroll. He spoke steadily, confident. He was certain this would work. As Iruka vehemently denied this, Naruto couldn't help but wonder why. He'd already declared himself against Mizuki, so why did he? He was interrupted by Mizuki's mocking laugh. I'll tell you the truth. Don't. After the incident 12 years ago, a law was created. Naruto didn't bite, but Mizuki continued, unheeding. Smug, self-assured victory was etched in every inch of his face. It's a law that only you, Naruto, can't learn of. Stop, Mizuki. Mizuki's smugness remained in place. He wasn't about to compromise this for the protests of a weakling Chunin. It is the law not to say that Naruto is a monster fox. His face was triumphant as he finished, drowning out Iruka's pleading. You are the Kyuubi that killed Iruka's parents and destroyed Konoha. The village has been lying to you all this time. Naruto kept his face blank, which Mizuki seemed to interpret as shock. You didn't think it was weird that so many people hated you so much? He unhooked one of his giant shuriken. No one's ever going to recognize you. Even Iruka hates you. Die, Naruto. Naruto sat trembling, his arms wrapped around the scroll. He couldn't help it. Damned adrenaline. Why did Iruka have to jump in this time, too? Naruto stood his ground. He knew he could have dodged the shuriken, but Iruka knocked him to the ground and took the hit anyway. The shock of that, followed by Iruka's tearful confession which was refuted by Mizuki, had been more than he could handle, and he ran off. Again, Iruka was in no danger yet, he knew that. Mizuki was after him. Iruka had just been collateral damage. But Naruto knew that Mizuki could not get the scroll. If he did, he would take it to Orochimaru. Mizuki would die, or worse, and Orochimaru would have access to all the kenjutsu sealed away in this scroll. Naruto had only read through a quarter of it before finding the Daitatsumaki, but he was sure that there were more techniques of the gruesome variety than there were of the chakra-draining variety, and he was certain that Orochimaru, unlike Mizuki, would be able to master them all. He stiffened. Iruka and Mizuki had just dropped in, and Mizuki was trying to convince Iruka that Naruto was, in fact, the Kyuubi reincarnated. I'm not letting an idiot like you get that scroll. Iruka was defiant in the face of Mizuki's betrayal. You're the idiot here. Naruto is the same as me. Same as you? That scroll holds endless possibilities. There's no way that bastard fox won't make use of its powers. You're right, Iruka condoned quietly. Naruto gulped. Moment of truth, had his tampering driven away the first person to ever recognize him? If Naruto was the Kyuubi, but he's not. And he's different from you. He's not a power-hungry, selfish fool. He's a determined student, who understands the pain of others, and the pain of not being recognized for who you are, instead of the circumstances of your birth. He understands so well, he's willing to sacrifice his own glory for the well-being of others. He's an excellent student that I recognize, and he will be a great shinobi. He's not the Kyuubi. He is Uzumaki Naruto of Konoha, idiot. Just for that, you're going to die and dash. Mizuki never finished his sentence, and his shuriken throw went wide. Having an angry blonde 12-year-old kick you in the chin tends to do that. As Mizuki skidded across the forest floor, Naruto sat the scroll on the ground, one hand on the dowel to keep it upright. Don't touch Iruka-sensei. If you do, I'll kill you. The killing intent that accompanied that statement left neither Chunin in any doubt that he meant it. Mizuki still tried to act like he had control of the situation, however. Go ahead and talk. I can deal with a kid like you easily. His hands in the appropriate seal, Naruto decided it was time to see just how much he'd improved from the other timeline. Go ahead and try. You'll get 1,000 times more damage back. Try if you can, you bastard demon! Mizuki screamed. Tajua Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. That section of forest took on quite the flattering shade of orange as the Kage Bunshin literally crowded over themselves. It wasn't possible to see a single speck of green. Mizuki stumbled and lost his balance at the sight of so many demons. Naruto, all of them, grinned. Last time, he'd not even come close to the mark of 1,000 that he'd promised. Maybe 300 at most. This time, he wouldn't be surprised if he'd exceeded that number. So come on then. Come and get me. Mizuki looked like this was the last place on the planet he wanted to be. Oh, Mizuki, Naruto thought. Hell's looking mighty tempting right about now, isn't it? Mizuki screamed. About an hour later, Mizuki lay twitching on the ground, beaten to a bloody pulp. Maybe I overdid it a little, Naruto admitted sheepishly. Inwardly, he was disappointed that Mizuki couldn't take any more punishment. Kami knows he deserved it. Iruka, for his part, was both amazed and a little disturbed. He'd been skeptical when Naruto had told him he was holding back, especially after his performance in the ninjutsu exam. But now, no, Naruto was most definitely not boasting emptily. To be able to use that many Kage Bunshin without collapsing was a feat in and of itself. True, he couldn't use Bunshin, but with this level of proficiency in Kage Bunshin, he didn't need to. Naruto was ready and deserving of being called a genin of Konoha. In time, he would be more than deserving of the title of Hokage. Naruto's first meeting with Konomaru had proceeded almost exactly as it had the first time around, and he had ended up, like before, teaching Konomaru the meaning of determination. He'd also ended up, like before, teaching Konomaru the Oiroku no Jutsu. The boy was going to become a genius in its use. He'd also got to use the harem no jutsu on that closet pervert Ebisu. Again, that was never going to get old. Nor had it, he giggled to himself. Coming up with increasingly perverted ninjutsu, and using them on Ebisu had become a private competition between the 6th Hokage and his loyal jounin, Konomaru. But that was in the future. For now, Konomaru was still an impatient, if determined, young ninja in training. He was improving. Naruto had just waved him goodbye on his way to the genin's explanatory meeting, and although his stealth ability was awful now, or was it? He somehow managed to appear whenever Naruto least expected it. He'd be far better in the future. But then that was the whole problem, wasn't it? People needed to get better sooner than before. Standing in front of the academy, still a few minutes early, Naruto's gut was wrenching itself apart. Oh sure, he'd managed to pass the academy exam, but Kakashi's bell test was coming up. And even before that, there was the team listings. Shikamaru and Chuji were going to be stuck with Ino again. He was sure of that. The Ino-Shikacho trio wouldn't be broken apart because of a difference in skill. Hey, who knew, they might even convert Ino to being a determined, capable kunoichi as had happened last time. Eventually. Even then, her speciality was still undercover infiltration and investigation, but she'd still improved drastically after she started to take the whole thing seriously, and even gotten up to scratch in terms of outright combat ability. Perhaps that would happen a little earlier this time. Hinata was unlikely to be teamed with anyone other than Kiba and Shino. Team 8, later Team Kurenai, had become legendary as field reconnaissance, which Naruto had learned was the whole damned point of putting together a team consisting of an Aburame, with their loyal and nigh undetectable Kakai, and Inuzuka, with their keen sense of smell and heavy combat ability, and a Hyuga, with the Byakugan. Shino and Kiba were always serious about their ability, and about furthering said ability. Hinata's lack of confidence had meant they were looking out for her most of the time. That wasn't going to be an issue this time around. Naruto's biggest worry was that Iruka would put him in a different team. It was possible, however unlikely, that Iruka's knowledge of Naruto's precocious ability would color his opinion of whether or not Naruto really was dead last in the class. Of course, that was what all the assessment scores said, so maybe. Naruto shook his head. Iruka knew damn well why Naruto had held back in class, so even if he did want to help, that would be balanced out by where he'd go normally. Naruto had no reason to worry about that, even if this was a delicate period. What he understood about probability, coupled with Shikamaru's own projections, suggested that they wouldn't be causing any drastic changes until the first time they fought all out. That wasn't going to happen until long after team allocations, but there was another event that could happen before even that. The real reason why Naruto was in such a distraught state. He might be able to avoid it, he might not, but there was no denying the fact that the first time around on this day in that classroom, no. Strike it from your mind, that never happened. If he told himself that enough times, it might even be true. Unfortunately, despite Naruto's vehement denial of the event, which never happened, it did still happen had happened. Would happen? Naruto, if he wasn't careful, was going to end up kissing Sasuke. Naruto whimpered. Please don't let that happen again. Hinata approached the academy for what she knew would be the final time, only to come across Naruto standing on his own, looking towards the same academy with dread. He was also shaking? What could possibly frighten Naruto so much? Ano Naruto-kun? Naruto blinked and snapped out of it, turning to see who had called his name. Eh? Hinata. She walked closer, and other newly graduated genin filed in around them. He was still a little anxious about something. Is everything all right, Naruto-kun? He swallowed and started to nod, which then turned into rather frantic shaking of the head. What's wrong? He looked around in a paranoid frenzy. No one? No one? Can't take that chance. He indicated the trees by the lone swing. She nodded and followed him there. Well, you remember what happened last time, right? He asked. We were assigned our genin teams, and then left with our jounin sensei. He shook his head, that terrified look still present. Before that. Just before Iruka sensei came into the classroom, Hinata thought carefully. Oh, that. You mean when you and Sasuke-kun? It did not happen. His face was contorted in fear. I'm afraid it did, Naruto-kun. I know. Just let me pretend. For a little while longer Naruto looked trapped. He'd often looked back at that memory and laughed, in later years. But apparently he wasn't so eager to relive it. Hinata thought that to be understandable. She would be just as reluctant to kiss Sakura. As far as Hinata could tell, the fact that he'd kissed Sasuke, however accidentally, was made worse by the fact that it was his first kiss. No, Naruto-kun, you could try and avoid it. I've considered that, but some things up until now have made me worry that maybe I can't. The very thought was terrifying, but this would be the first real test of whether or not fate could be defeated. If he ended up kissing Sasuke, despite his best efforts, then fate was likely immutable, and the whole point of their self-appointed mission would be proved useless. However, if he could avoid the event, then fate truly was something malleable. Something you could forge for yourself out of your own determination and ability. Naruto was really hoping that fate could be defeated here and now, for many, many reasons. Naruto-kun. Fate is not unchangeable. You taught me that. You taught Neji and Aizen that. You will teach so many others to fight for their own destiny. She wanted to hug him, right now, but she could not risk that. Kiba would be able to catch the intermingling sense. The loud and often tactless boy would then make a scene of the whole thing, and word would get back to her father, or worse, Neji. She wanted to kiss Naruto right now, but she could not risk that. She had to settle for grasping his hand tightly in reassurance. His grin was sickly, dreading what was to come, but his grip was firm against her hand. Nothing needed be said as they parted and walked into the academy. You hear that, Fate? Naruto thought. I'm not going to give in that easy. Naruto was wary. He was sitting where he had been last time around, right next to Sasuke. There had been very few seats left when he had come in after Hinata, but Ino and Sakura had yet to arrive, which meant the danger wasn't over yet. Though, to be honest, Naruto wasn't going to be breathing easy until today it was over. That is, until midnight had come and gone. He had every sense on full alert, and it was obvious to several people that he was tense about something. Naruto realized that he had to work on that, as did Sasuke, who was watching him out of the corner of his eye. What had the class clown so on edge was a mystery to the class prodigy. Sasuke hated that title. It wasn't that it was misplaced, he was a genius. It was just that he was given it before anyone was even aware of his true ability. He was an Uchiha, Itachi's little brother, and to top it off, the last of the Uchiha clan. So, naturally, he must be a genius. Sasuke's fresh scowl was lost in the perpetual one plastered on his face. The weaklings around him had pestered him since day one. Almost the minute he left the hospital after that day, he noticed people staring at him, whispering. It had been extremely unsettling. He had tried to silence them with a glare, but a 7-year-old just can't quite glare properly, so he ignored them. If they wanted to gossip about him, fine. He had more important things to worry about, like killing that treacherous weasel bastard. To do that, though, he needed power. And so he concentrated on power. He distinguished himself as the best in the class easily, and his individual training outside of class meant that the academy quickly became only a formality. Soon after that, he noticed his first fangirls. He'd been left alone in the academy, partly because of the reputation he'd been given following the news of Itachi's betrayal, partly because of his own reaction to said reputation. Without realizing, he'd become the aloof, tortured genius Uchiha Sasuke, last prince of the powerful and famous clan that had been Konoha's pride. It drew fangirls with overactive imaginations like flies, no, like cockroaches. Such people, indulging fantasy over reality, were beneath him, and he made a point of ignoring them at all times. None of them had power, and that was what he was interested in. Of course, he wasn't so self-absorbed as to be averse to the odd mystery or two. In fact, a ninja had to be able to see underneath the underneath, so mystery novels were a small vice he allowed himself to indulge in. Real life took precedence, though, and so he found himself wondering why the class clown was so alert with more gusto than he would have cared to admit. His train of thought was rather rudely intruded upon, though not fully derailed, by the loud arrival of the two worst offenders in his fangirl club. If possible, Naruto immediately tensed up even more once Sakura and Ino entered the room. Once their requisite argument for just entering the classroom was complete, Sakura looked around. It was obvious who she was looking for, and she found him. Naruto feigned ignorance of her presence, but it was rather hard to do so when she ran up to him. Looking up at her in what he hoped was mild surprise, he greeted her, cautiously. Good morning, Sakura. Out of the way. She immediately threw him out of his seat. Rubbing his head where it impacted with the opposite desk, he watched as she enthusiastically greeted Sasuke. The greeting was entirely one-sided, however, as Sasuke did not even acknowledge her presence. Naruto stood, getting out of the way of the near riot that was forming over who got to sit next to Sasuke-kun. The genin in question was thoroughly bored of the whole event, and had no qualms about displaying that boredom. Then Naruto leapt up on his desk. If, right at that moment, Naruto had to name what he thought to be his worst quality, he would have to admit that he enjoyed tempting fate far too much. It just made it all the sweeter when, in his usual fashion, he ended up spitting in fate's face and laughing at its best attempts to make him stick to its plans. It was such a ridiculously consistent habit that he might even go so far as to call it a weakness of his. It would certainly explain why he was in a position that, were he of any sounder mind, he would have run away from without looking back. He knew what would happen were he to remain here too long, but that was the point. He intended not to stay there too long, but to stay there for a while anyway, engaging Sasuke in a glaring contest. The bastard was really quite skilled at it, even directing a small trickle of killing intent into the effort. It was then the fresh genin in the next row down decided to lean back and throw his elbow onto the desk behind him. Needless to say, Naruto reacted quickly. Arm, desk, somersault over and land on Sasuke. Fail. Naruto's only solace came from one little thought. At least we didn't end up kissing this time. The Uchiha fan club didn't see it that way, however. Naruto had, in their eyes, physically assaulted Sasuke. Such an act had only one suitable punishment. Naruto winced. This had been painful last time, but at least this time they weren't trying to avenge their lost fantasies. So, surely this time around wouldn't be quite as painful. Right, starting today, you are all official ninja, but you all are still new genin. It's only going to get harder from here. Naruto was barely conscious enough to listen to Iruka's speech for all the wide-eyed new genin. He knew roughly what it had consisted of. He'd given it himself to the first class to graduate under his stint as the sixth. Ere he would give it when he became the sixth. That got old really fast. When, exactly, was he going to feel comfortable in his own skin again? Then Iruka got to the part that Naruto wanted to be awake for. You will all be in groups of 3, where you will accomplish missions under a jounin teacher. The team allocations. This was going to be one of the more nerve-wracking moments after coming back, since Naruto had no direct control over them. Team 10 was not in danger of being split up, and unless they'd cause some major changes, the council's pet project, in the form of a specialized tracking team, was also unlikely to be changed. Team 7 was the biggest worry, since, unlike a couple of other teams, there were no outside politics at work. It was dependent solely on in-class performance. The muttering around the classroom at the mention of 3-man teams brought Naruto out of his funk. He could hear Sakura and Ino arguing over who would be in Sasuke's group, but then, nearly every kunoichi in the room was discussing that issue. He could also, this time, distinctly hear Sasuke's scoff at the idea of being put on a team. He glared at the prodigy out of the corner of his eye. Willfully oblivious to the small dramas being perpetrated throughout the classroom, Iruka continued, flashing the sheet of paper that held the team formations. We've arranged the groups such that overall abilities are equivalent. I will now announce them. Shikamaru, from his seat on the back row, had a very good view of the spectacle that Naruto had put on for the class, but in true lazy genius form, had ignored it. Now that Iruka was here and about to announce the team setups, though, his attention was caught, enough so that he could hear Ino and Sakura's brief argument over Sasuke's team. He smirked. This was too good a chance to pass up. Ino, you're not going to be on Sasuke's team. The blonde was riled up at this casual dismissal of her ambitions, such as they were. Oh, really? And what makes you say that? Ino, who's your dad? She blinked. Yamanaka Inoichi. You know that. He continued regardless. Who's my dad? Nara Shikaku. Her eyes were narrowed now. She was suspicious of something. Chuji's dad? Akimichi Chuza. Shikamaru nodded. Right. Now, think very carefully. How are those 3 otherwise known, collectively, in the village? Ino's impeccably plucked eyebrow rose a notch. They're the Ino Shikacho trio. What are you getting at? If you have to ask, I think you already know. He grinned. Does the phrase, stick with what works, mean anything to you? Her expression was priceless. That doesn't necessarily mean that. Hi. Let's just listen then, shall we? Team 7, Uzumaki Naruto immediately tensed. This is it. Haruno Sakura yes. One down though Sakura looked just as downcast to be in Naruto's team as she had been before. Uchiha Sasuke. Sakura cheered. Naruto had to fight not to smile. Don't smile. Don't yell. Do nothing, react as Iruka had a knowing smile, and it was directed at him. Naruto smiled back. Teammate, Hyuga Hinata. Hi. Inazuka Kiba a meant to be feral smirk in response. Aburaim Shino. No response. Ino was incensed that she had lost her place at Sasuke-kun's side to the forehead girl. Why? Just to rub it in, Sakura turned and flashed a victory sign. Why do you get to be with him? Sakura only grinned in response and Shikamaru butted in. What's so attractive about him anyway? Don't you even know that, Shikamaru? I have no idea what you girls see in him. Is it looks or something? Because he definitely doesn't have much in the way of personality. Ino fixed him with a glare, before brushing him off with a patronizing response. That's why you're not popular. I wouldn't want to be on a team with a guy like you. Shikamaru simply grinned as Iruka continued to read out the teams. Team 10, Yamanaka Ino. Nara Shikamaru. Ino gaped. I told Shikamaru began. Don't say it. Besides, there might be someone else. Akimichi Chuji. You were saying? Those are the teams. I'm going to introduce your Jounin sensei in the afternoon. Enjoy your lunch. At the mention of lunch, the genin quickly began to file out of the room for their food. Some teams left as a group, while others decided to spend their last day at the academy with friends who would be continuing in different groups. Team 7, however, split up entirely. Sasuke wanted to eat alone, and couldn't care less about his teammates. Sakura wanted to avoid Naruto and have lunch with Sasuke, using the rather hypocritical excuse of improving team dynamics. Naruto needed to change this situation right now. He intended to do so by getting the three of them to eat lunch together. It would be a start, at least. Sasuke Yaro. Several of the girls tensed at Sasuke being addressed in such a manner, but ultimately did nothing but seethe. In spite of himself, Sasuke paused. What do you want? If we're on the same team, how about we eat lunch as a team? I'm sure Sakura will be okay with it. The prodigy simply brushed him off. You know, you're going to be stuck with us for a long time. You may as well get used to it now. The response that little statement earned him was a cold glare. Naruto fought the urge to laugh as he watched the gears turn in Sasuke's head. True, he would be stuck with them for a while. But in Sasuke's case, that just meant he wanted to spend as little time as possible around them. Eating lunch with them was not conducive to that goal. On the other hand, it might be easier in the long run if he could set precedent now, by agreeing and then being as uncooperative as he could. If they ever did think to convince him to join them for social purposes again, they'd have this example to fall back on. The enigma that was the dead last was also still at the forefront of his mind. A few minutes with these weaklings was not so great a price as to decipher Naruto, was it? Fine. Sakura, as predicted, had little objection to eating lunch with Sasuke, so it was that Team 7 found themselves sitting on a nearby rooftop, sharing quality time as they ate their lunches. Their respective tastes and resources were made plain to see. Sasuke had a self-made lunch of onigiri, Sakura had a bento, prepared for by a loving mother, and Naruto, of course, had instant ramen. Naruto's eyes flickered between the two genin in front of him. Sakura was, in between bites of her bento lunch, looking at Sasuke with something like longing. Scratch that, it was longing. Sasuke was silent, his eyes closed while he ate, as he did his best to ignore the occasional loud slurping noises from Naruto's ramen and soft clicking of Sakura's chopsticks. They ate in relative silence, and they finished in silence. Naruto was struck by just how awkward the situation actually was. Sasuke wasn't going to say anything because that would be beneath him. Sakura wasn't going to say anything except to parrot her precious Sasuke-kun, and he wasn't going to say anything. So, it fell to Naruto to do something about it. The question was, what to say to break the ice. So we're a team now, huh? Silence. Sasuke appeared insulted that Naruto was trying to socialize with him at all, while Sakura appeared insulted that he was trying to interfere in what she must have viewed as time alone with Sasuke. Never mind that Naruto was the reason why she had any time with Sasuke, alone or not. Okay, fine. She wanted alone time with Sasuke? She'd have it. At least then she might say something, and Naruto would rather have a rapport between two members of his team than none. Naruto stood, picking up the remains of his cup ramen, and whatever waste his two teammates had produced with their lunch. I'll just get rid of the trash, alright? Maybe, just maybe, if the two of them could talk alone, Sakura would get over her idealized image of Sasuke sooner. Naruto went and left the two of them alone. Sasuke watched him go with a curious eye, taking in everything he could, the way he walked, the way he had spoken, the way he carried himself, anything to try and unravel the mystery that was the class clown. Annoyingly, Sasuke had never paid much attention to him before. Why should he have? Naruto was the dead last, beneath his notice. At least until he became an object of curiosity. Sasuke did not like admitting when he was beaten. He was going to figure out what the hell was going on if it killed him. A shy cough caught his attention. Oh. Right. Sakura. Not that Sasuke would be able to forget the number of times he'd heard it over the past few years, mostly shouted by Naruto. He'd shown an interest in the girl a while back, hadn't he? Perhaps she knew something of him. Sakura, the girl started, then beamed at him. Sasuke kept his face as impassive as ever as he continued, what do you think of Naruto? Sakura didn't answer immediately. Her first instinct was to decry Naruto as an annoying pest, who interfered with her love at every opportunity. But then, that wasn't quite true, was it? At least not anymore, it wasn't. Then again, Sakura didn't realize that. The idea she had of Naruto was the same as it had always been, but since he didn't bother her much anymore, she didn't think about him. Ever since this morning, however, that public scene, that show of pure idiocy, attacking Sasuke-kun, She was certain this was a relapse. Now they were on the same team, he must have thought he had a chance with her. Never mind that it had happened before the team listings. He's gotten used to interfering with my love. He's having fun watching me having trouble. She flicked her hair. It's because he doesn't have any parents, you know. Sasuke's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. I mean, without any parents to scold you when you do something wrong, of course someone's going to grow up like that. Sasuke had a perfect poker face. This was not due to being able to keep his face neutral no matter what, but rather because he usually reacted to everything in the same way, with a permanent scowl. There were some exceptions, such as when he was taken by surprise, which never happened. He was the Uchiha prodigy, after all, but overall, his emotional state was remarkably hard to read by virtue of sheer pessimism. So it was that Sakura was unable to notice the warning look that she was being given right now. Her only thoughts now were on the familiar subject of romance involving Sasuke. They were alone. No one was going to bother them, but Naruto could return at any time. If she was going to gain Sasuke's acceptance, it had to be now, but Sasuke couldn't forget about that annoying guy. I don't care about him. I don't care about anything else. She took a deep breath. I just want you to recognize me. That's all I want. All I ever wanted. Please, Sasuke-kun. There was silence following Sakura's confession. It stretched. Finally, Sasuke stood up. He walked away. As Sasuke-kun? He stopped. Without even looking at her, he spoke over his shoulder. Just 3 words. You are pretty. Helpful. Good looking. Please, any of those. Just acknowledge me, Sasuke-kun. Annoying. Naruto was finished with his trash duty and had begun to walk back to where his new team was. He was idly wondering just what the two of them had spoken of in his absence, when Sasuke stalked past, his casual slouch perfected, his arrogant scowl firmly in place. Oh, Sasuke! So, what did you and he walked past without saying anything? Sakura talk about Naruto trailed off as Sasuke brushed him off effortlessly. Fine. Ignore me, you bastard. You can't do that forever. Naruto spun on his heel and resumed walking back to where Sakura presumably was. Naruto came across Sakura looking unexpectedly downcast, considering that she had just received something that most of the girls in their class would kill for, 5 minutes alone with Sasuke. Naruto sighed. It seemed that either Sasuke had done something to shoot down her aspirations, or she just hadn't even spoken to him, and was now berating herself for it. Naruto hoped it to be the former, though not out of spite or jealousy. If Sakura now had a good idea of what Sasuke was like, the real Sasuke, not the idealized image that everyone in the village seemed to have, then she would either start to focus on her training, or she would simply try harder to impress him by focusing on her training. She still didn't like Naruto, though. That was something he now intended to remedy. Sakura, for her part, was kneeling on the rooftop where Sasuke had left her, thinking over what he had said in response to her opinion of Naruto. You are annoying. It wasn't a pleasant feeling, she thought. Having the person you admire most just dismiss you like that, like you were beneath them, like she had done to Naruto whenever he had asked her out. Yes, like that. Sakura felt like kicking herself. She really wasn't a nice person. She had constantly dismissed Naruto just because she was too busy looking at Sasuke. She hadn't given it any thought, since he just kept coming back and back again, and never stopped asking. No, that wasn't true. He'd given up about a year ago, hadn't he? She'd barely noticed. Well, that was then, this is now. Maybe she could start being a nicer person. Starting now, alright? I'm a new person, starting today. Really? What kind of person are you now, Sakura? I'm a nicer person. I'm someone who won't treat someone like dirt just for talking to me. Her head jerked up. Wait, then do your best, Sakura. Sakura spun around. When had Naruto? Changing yourself is hard, but no matter what happens, never forget the person who you want to be. He was smiling warmly, and those words he meant what he was saying. Sakura smiled back. Well, shall we go back, teammate? Over the course of the afternoon, various jounin showed up to collect their new genin teams. Kurenai arrived for Team 8 earliest, while of the other jounin, Asuma took Team 10 last. Not counting one Team 7, Sasuke sat quietly brooding. He was good at that brooding. Kami knows, he had enough practice at it. Sakura was not sitting as close to him as she could. She had been, but for one seat, but she had stood and started grumbling about late jounin about 3 hours ago. She was now pacing, and looking back and forth between the clock and the door. Naruto was sitting bored, with his head resting on his arms. He knew that their jounin sensei was going to be late. He also knew why he did so, and just how late he was going to be. That didn't make it any less annoying, however. He glanced at the clock. It was 2 minutes past 5. His stomach grumbled, and he patted it fondly. I know, buddy, I know. He fingered a cup ramen in his equipment pouch, before remembering that he had no hot water. An idea struck him, a possible way to get Team 7 to bond. Granted, the last one hadn't worked very well, but Sasuke watched Naruto as he stood up and started walking. He stopped in front of Sasuke. Had Naruto noticed that he was observing him? Sasuke, what? The young scion demanded. You can use katan techniques, right? Sasuke blinked. Of course he could. Overbearing social stigma aside, an Uchiha couldn't rightfully call themselves an Uchiha if they couldn't use Katan ninjutsu. Naruto pulled out a brown scroll and unsealed a bottle of water and a copper kettle. Can you heat up this water for me? For the purposes of the conversation, Sasuke ignored the casual ease with which that was done, though he certainly filed it away under weird crap that Naruto has pulled. That was a mental file that would be bursting at the seams come this time next year. Why would I heat up that water? For ramen. Naruto's tone made it sound like the most obvious thing in the world as he pulled a cup ramen out of his equipment pouch. Sasuke's eyebrow twitched at the pedantic ease with which that question was answered. Why do you want to eat ramen? Because lunch was 5 hours ago, and I'm hungry. Sasuke glanced at a clock. 5:05. Funny how the time went by when you weren't paying attention. Also, now that Naruto mentioned it, okay, fine. Naruto's face lit up, but only on one condition. What can be? He was interrupted by a loud growl. Sasuke's face, hidden behind his hands, reddened without fear of recrimination. Do you have any more on you? Naruto's fox-like grin was not well received as he unsealed a second and third cup ramen. And the ramen is done! Naruto immediately leapt for one of the 3 cup ramen that sat steaming on the desk. Sasuke reached for his share, if slightly more sedately, as Naruto broke his chopsticks and peeled off the lid completely. After a hurried itadakimasu, the ramen was quickly slurped down. Sasuke scoffed at such behavior, though as he started on his own, he had to admit that Naruto knew his ramen. Sasuke had never tasted cup ramen this good. He made a mental note of the brand. As he slurped down another string of noodles, Naruto only then noticed that the third lay unclaimed. Looking up, he saw Sakura watching it hungrily, but seemed to be debating whether or not to actually eat it. Sakura, aren't you hungry? Lunch was 5 hours ago. Sakura had to catch herself from nodding in response. Remember your diet, and no, I'm fine. She shook her head. I'm not really that hungry. Her stomach disagreed, loudly. Naruto was disappointed. So she was still at that stage, was she? Pointlessly dieting away in the hope that she could catch Sasuke's. He grinned. Perhaps he could use that against her. Oh? So you're on a diet then? She flushed brilliant red and turned to see Sasuke completely uninterested, eating his ramen with a minimum of fuss. She hissed at the blonde, trying not to attract Sasuke's attention to this. And Naruto? You shouldn't talk about such things so openly. Naruto ignored her. You know, I really don't get why some people should need to diet. It just seems silly to me. I mean, all you're doing is depriving yourself of nutrition, right? He glanced at the unresponsive Uchiha. Well, Sasuke, what do you think? The Uchiha spared him a glare. It did not have the desired effect, however. Sasuke knew what Naruto was trying to do, and it was very likely that Naruto knew that Sasuke knew this. Still, Sasuke's gaze flickered towards Sakura. If she could be convinced, then maybe she wouldn't be quite so useless if she absolutely had to fight. I think it's ridiculous. We're ninja, expected to participate in strenuous activities on a regular basis. Dieting? Pointless. If you're not burning off your dietary intake naturally, then you should be training more, not eating less. With that said, he went back to eating. Sakura stared. That was more than she'd ever heard Sasuke say in one go before. From that, she concluded that he felt at least somewhat strongly that way. She returned her gaze to the still warm plastic container on the desk. Well, if Sasuke-kun really felt that way, and he was right, too, if you thought about it. Her stomach gurgled its assent. Ah, hell with it. Naruto grinned behind his chopsticks as he watched Sakura take the ramen that was laid out for her and begin to hungrily devour it. Well, that was another silly habit he'd managed to break his teammates out of early. He was making good progress, really. Now he just had to find some way to get Sasuke to stop being such a frigid bastard, and really, things would sort themselves out until Orochimaru. He slurped down the last of his ramen and laid his chopsticks on the cup. Gaucha Susuma. As Sasuke finished off his own ramen, he watched as Naruto took the empty and now room-temperature kettle and resealed it into a brown scroll. Laying the chopsticks on the empty cup, he decided now was as good a time as any to ask. He might even be able to get that skill as well. Although, Naruto looked up from rolling up the scroll. How did you do that? At Naruto's confused expression, Sasuke considered elaborating. He pointed to the scroll in Naruto's hands, and the other genin's face lit up in realization. Oh, this? It's Fuinjutsu. Sasuke twitched, and Sakura, finished with her own ramen, spoke up in his place. Yes, we know that, but how do you know Fuinjutsu? The qualifier, how he could do it at that level, hung unspoken. Naruto shrugged. I guess it counts as independent study? What I can do isn't really all that impressive, though. Despite what it looks like, what I can do is still just basic principles. I'd need a proper teacher, someone who knew what they were doing before I could see any progress past this level. It was a lie, but Naruto wasn't going to share that with them. So long as the basics were known, it was entirely possible to advance without a teacher. You just needed to experiment. A lot. He cringed internally, remembering his attempts to improve on the standard exploding tag in the future. Hinata had been very close to making him swear off Fuinjutsu completely. So, this is just basics, more or less. You'd still need a basic understanding of Fuinjutsu, but yeah, Using these things is pretty easy. I mean, I've got 3 more. Both of them were incredulous. 4? Naruto, why do you need 4 of them? I don't. But they do come in handy for fieldwork. Look, see? He pulled out 3 scrolls to join the brown still in his hand. There were 2 red and 1 blue. The brown ones got field survival gear, the blues got first aid equipment, and the reds have got lots and lots of kunai and shuriken, just in case I run out. Sasuke nodded. He could see the logic behind having such supplies, but having 4 sealing scrolls just for that seemed a bit extravagant. They must have cost quite a bit. Not really. I made them myself. Sasuke blinked, and Sakura took up the slack. So, even making them is just basic fuinjutsu? Using them? Yes. Making them? Oh hell no. It took Naruto months to figure out how to make these. Where the hell was a distraction when you needed one? Well, the door slid open as he was about to answer. Saved. Kakashi watched the 3 genins sat in front of him on the rooftop. The pink-haired girl was watching the Uchiha out of the corner of her eye, while the Uchiha was trying to ignore her. He was succeeding quite well, come to think of it. Meanwhile, Naruto was simply sitting with a blank look on his face. Why was he trying to keep his emotional state hidden? Well, time to get on with it. It should be interesting to see how they see themselves. Let's see, why don't you introduce yourselves? Introduce ourselves? What should we say? Well, I guess that's a fair question. What you like, hate, your dreams and hobbies. Kakashi spread his arms as he spoke, a vague gesture. Something like that. The blonde spoke up now. Then, why don't you introduce yourself first, sensei? Me? I'm Hatake Kakashi. I have no intention of telling you my likes and dislikes. As for my dream, he trailed off. I have a few hobbies. He rather enjoyed the perturbed look on the girl's face. But why was the blonde contemplative? Hatake Kakashi, Hatake Kakashi, Kakashi ah. He leapt to his feet and pointed at the jounin. Daigijimea sensei talks about you all the time. You're his eternal rival, or something. Kakashi blinked. Eternal rival? That sounded suspiciously like Guy. If it was, the name was certainly appropriate. But sensei? Well, I guess we start with you. Naruto grinned. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. I like people who don't rely on power that isn't their own, and I don't like people who expect to be recognized for things they never did. My hobbies are enjoying ramen and training. My dream is to become strong enough to protect everyone I care about, and then become the Hokage. He grew up in an interesting way. I wonder if he's talking about the Kyuubi with that like of his? Right, next, I'm Haruno Sakura. I like the person I like is. She glanced at Sasuke, and Naruto sighed internally. Well, it was stupid to think she'd grow out of her fangirling in just one day, really. Sasuke didn't even blink at the attention, his stare boring into Kakashi. It was easy to guess what his thoughts were at this point. Finally, a jounin sensei. Now I can become powerful enough to kill Itachi. Sakura continued with her self-introduction. My hobby is. She paused. Her hobby? Did she even have one beyond Sasuke-kun? Well, my dream is to another glance at Sasuke, to become someone that the person I like can like back. Oh, good grief, and? What do you hate? She had to think about that one. Her requisite answer of Naruto was no longer valid. He was a better person than she'd given him credit for. No. Girls her age are more interested in romance than ninjutsu. But the Uchiha was next. This should be interesting. Last guy. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. There are many things that I hate, and there aren't many things that I like. Also, I have an ambition that I have no intention to leave as just a dream. The revival of my clan, and to kill a certain person. Silence greeted that statement, as all present digested that. 2 people knew who he was talking about, while the other simply interpreted it as badass. Just as I thought, Kakashi mused. Naruto was simply forlorn. Both were thinking the same thing as Kakashi decided to move on. Itachi, you bastard. You did this to your own little brother? Alright, you 3 all have unique personalities. I like that. We're going to begin a mission, starting tomorrow. Sakura put her hand up. What kind of mission, sensei? First, we're going to do something that we 4 can do. What kind of mission? Naruto didn't put his hand up, but asked his question nonetheless. Survival training. Why are we going to train when it's a mission? Sakura complained. We had plenty of training at the academy. This is no ordinary training. So then, what kind of training is it? Naruto couldn't help an ever so slight sarcastic tone tinting his speech. Whether or not Kakashi noticed it, however, damn that mask, Kakashi started chuckling to himself. Naruto had to fight not to roll his eyes at the insincere sadism it conveyed. The first time around, it had been intimidating when put in context, but now? Kakashi needed acting lessons. He was almost as big a ham as Guy. The other 2 were understandably annoyed by the apparent incongruity of the meeting. What's so funny, sensei? Still giggling a bit, Kakashi made a show of forcing himself to answer. Naruto twitched. Enough theatrics and get on with it, damn it. Well, you see, if I say this, I'm sure you 3 are going to be surprised. The laughter stopped as abruptly as Kakashi's tone turned menacing. Out of the 27 graduates, only 9 are going to become genin. The other 18 will be sent back to the academy. In other words, this training is going to be an extremely hard test with a dropout rate of 66%. Kakashi grinned as his words had the desired effect on his new team. Sasuke glared. Sakura gaped. Naruto was picking his ear? Arrogant little brat, this one. See? You three are surprised. Sensei, if that's the case, then what was the final exam for? You sound bored, Naruto-kun. I hope you don't find what I'm telling you boring. Peh. It's not like it matters. Whatever this test is, he grinned, I'm going to pass it. Really? Now is that confidence or just stupidity? Well, whatever. Is that so? Well, anyway, that exam was just to find those who have a chance of becoming genin. I am to determine whether you pass or fail tomorrow at the training grounds. Bring your equipment and meet at 5 a.m. Kakashi watched as the young genin got themselves psyched up for the test tomorrow. Even Sasuke was visibly shaking. Except for Naruto. Where did that confidence come from, to not even be sweating over the prospect? Meeting adjourned. Oh, and don't eat breakfast. You'll throw up if you do. At 5 a.m., Team 7 staggered, half awake, onto the training ground that Kakashi had designated. They greeted each other with the typical lethargy one could expect from having to be up that early. They milled about, trying to wake up a bit before their sensei arrived. 2 hours later, Naruto was annoyed, Sakura was pissed, and Sasuke was just as stoically bitter as he always was. Naruto knew how this went, even if the other two were only starting to get an idea of just how consistently late Kakashi could be. Bored to the teeth, Naruto stood up. Sasuke, what? Sasuke had a way of making questions sound like demands. Want to spar? An eyebrow was raised sardonically. You want to spar? Well, I figure that if yesterday was any example, we're going to be here until 10. He shrugged. We may as well get something out of it. Sasuke had to admit that he was beginning to suspect the same thing. There was also the matter of curiosity regarding Naruto's real ability. If his expertise with Fuinjutsu was any indication, then Naruto had been holding himself back in class. And that was just unacceptable. If Sasuke was going to be the best, then he had to prove that by facing others at their best. That someone would hold back against him skewed the whole thing. Not to mention that Sasuke had done some investigation. It hadn't been very hard to find out who Naruto meant when he said super bushy brows Sensei Meito Gai's exuberance was infamous in Konoha. His skill with taijutsu had just added fuel to the fire that was Sasuke's suspicions. If Naruto was learning from him, then surely he had to be better at taijutsu than his academy performance led people to believe. And if Naruto was as good as Sasuke thought, then why couldn't he learn from that same teacher as well? Yes. Power was everything. Itachi had to die, and as soon as possible. Alright then. Let's spar. Naruto just grinned in response as they both dropped their packs on the ground. Then they dropped into starting stances, and little alarm bells went off in Sasuke's head. Naruto's form in the academy had been sloppy, impatient, and easy to read, if difficult to ascertain what style he used. This, however, was textbook dragon style, with a hint of something else mixed, and Sasuke shook off his apprehensions. His own tiger style, while not favoring any one attribute above others, was insurmountable. No matter what tricks Naruto had, he wouldn't win. Let's go! Sasuke smirked at that outburst. He was still impatient. Honestly, did he really think fast? Was Sasuke's next thought as Naruto leapt to the offensive. He moved back, giving ground until he could break Naruto's momentum. Unpredictable, too, he realized. Naruto seemed to abandon some blows when he was halfway through based purely on a whim. That he originally intended them as serious blows meant the body language that typically preceded a feint was absent until it was too late. Catching a strike aimed at his left, Sasuke shot his knee at Naruto's solar plexus. The blonde twisted at an odd angle, almost dislocating his own shoulder, to dodge, then used that odd positioning to break Sasuke's grip on his arm, before quickly twisting around again and launching a roundhouse kick at Sasuke's head. The blows sailed harmlessly overhead as Sasuke rolled forward and away, hoping to get distance for an attack of his own. He didn't get the time though, as Naruto used the leg that had just kicked to jump towards where Sasuke was just turning to face him again. What followed was an exchange of punches and kicks, either gaining any advantage, focusing only on trying to keep the other off balance long enough for a more powerful blow. Then, Sasuke successfully got under Naruto's guard to score a hit on his shoulder. The hit threw him off, just enough to allow time for a sweeping kick to the legs. Naruto jumped, and blocked the uppercut waiting on the way down. They backed off from each other then, both needing a breather. Sasuke glared as he watched Naruto recover in just 3 deep breaths, while he was still panting heavily from that. Was he still holding back? Even after fighting him to a standstill, was Naruto still holding back? No, it was just that weird stamina of his. He'd always been able to recover quickly. Just how long could he last, Sasuke wondered. They had about 2.5 hours to kill time in. He smirked as Naruto came at him again. It was around 10ish, when Kakashi finally proceeded to the training grounds unhurriedly. Maybe he'd use the cat excuse. That was one he hadn't used in a while. His new team probably wouldn't be very happy with him for this, but well, every ninja needed to know how to be patient. Really, he was just helping them along with that. His constant tardiness was just another form of training for his Okami. He was falling into the trap that was everything equals training. He was turning into Guy. Right, his tardiness was not patience training for everyone around him. It was just him being a dick. Okay? Okay. Besides, it's not like they'll try to kill one another if I'm not around. Kakashi then walked into the clearing that was the center of the training ground and found Sasuke and Naruto trying to kill one another, while Sakura watched from the sidelines. Why did I say it? Why did I even think it? He was about to step in when Sakura noticed him. Ah, Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi-sensei's here. The two of them looked at him and stopped their fight. Belatedly, Kakashi realized that it was just a spar. A very heated spar, but a spar nonetheless, without killing intent. Sasuke was still breathing rather heavily, while Naruto just stretched a bit, took a few deep breaths and he was fine. Sasuke's breathing calmed down after a few minutes. It's one way to pass time, I suppose. Although, I wonder if I'm going to come across something similar every time I leave them alone? Kakashi coughed before continuing his usual routine. Well, sorry I'm late. See, a black cat crossed my path, so he trailed off. They weren't buying it. Well, you three seem to have kept yourselves occupied even without me, so let's move on. There was a tree stump off to his right, where he set down an alarm clock and primed it. Alarm set at 12 p.m. He turned around, decidedly pleased with the stupefied expressions that had got. Even from the cold Uchiha. They didn't go away when he pulled a pair of bells from out of nowhere. He dangled them from his forefinger and thumb, making sure to elicit a little jingle from both of them. He watched Naruto tense at the sight. Oh? Does he already know what's coming? Today's topic is to get one of these bells from me. He jingled them again, just to add emphasis. Whoever can't gets no lunch. I'm going to tie you there, and eat lunch in front of you. He indicated the 3 wooden posts in the middle of the clearing, calmly ignoring Sakura's sound of protest at the prospect of no lunch. Kakashi grinned as they worked out why he had told them not to eat breakfast, grateful for the mask he was wearing. Oh, these 3 were far too much fun to tease. Then along came the question he was waiting for them to ask. Wait, then why are there only 2 bells? Of course the book-smart Kunoichi would work it out first. Kakashi chuckled a bit before answering, an unnerving smile on his face, the kind that he knew people could see beneath his mask. Since there's only 2 bells, at least one person will have to be tied to the log. That person will fail since he failed to complete the mission. They will then be sent back to the academy. It might be just one, or all 3. The smile disappeared as he took note of their faces now. Determined. Ruthless, damn. They're already thinking only of themselves in this test. I had such hopes for the blonde kid, too. Going by his introduction, I thought maybe he understood well. Anyway, the test isn't over yet. They might surprise me. You can use shuriken and kunai. You won't be able to get this unless you have the intent to kill. But that's too dangerous, sensei. Kakashi ignored that little gem from Sakura. For such an intelligent girl, she certainly had a talent for missing the point. He took in the genin assembled before him. Well, they seemed eager enough. We're going to begin after I say, ready, start. Ready? Start. A basic skill for a ninja is to conceal your presence and hide. Kakashi stood in the clearing, taking note of his genin's positions. Everyone seemed to have hidden themselves well. Certainly, he doubted anyone of their respective levels less than a tracking specialist would notice them. Sakura under that bush, Sasuke up in that tree, Naruto standing right in front of me. With his arms crossed and a very strange smile on his face. His stance suggested either he was completely confident about his chances, or that he simply wasn't going to try anything yet. As shouldn't you be hiding like the other 2? Nah. I figure that if you're really a jounin, you'll know where we are no matter what. Besides, I'm still waiting on something before I can make my move. Kakashi blinked. Hell, it was his time to waste. If that's what he wanted to do, then okay. Well, if that's the case, I hope you don't mind if I read while we wait? He didn't even wait for a response, pulling out the second most recent Ika Paradise. Naruto scowled slightly at that, but said nothing except, yeah, whatever. Oi team, Sasuke almost jumped. What the hell was that dope doing? Kakashi was going to wait. Sasuke looked back at where Naruto was standing in the clearing. Then he looked at the Naruto who was next to him on the branch. Bunshin? His eyes tracked the shadow that both Narutos left on the branch and the ground, respectively. No. Kage Bunshin? When did he learn? Sasuke, what? He hissed, we need to work together. All of us need to work as team. There's only 2 bells, and we're only genin. Do you really think we're being expected to snag those bells by ourselves? From a goddamn jounin? I have a plan. We're a team, Sasuke, we need to act like it. Sasuke frowned at that. He had a point. But still, there were only 2 bells. Someone was going to be stuck with the short end of the stick. Moreover, he was not going to work with someone like Naruto. He was slightly better than Sasuke had given him credit for initially, but the fact remained that an Avenger's path was a solitary one. He would get those bells alone or not at all. Go away. If you really have a plan, then come and talk to me again when you have a bell. Naruto sighed, somehow, I thought you'd say that. Once I get a bell, meet me about 500 meters east. And with that, left him on his branch. It dispelled itself some ways away. Sasuke returned his attention to where Naruto suddenly stiffened, then shook his head sadly. Sakura was watching the tableau with trepidation. Naruto, that idiot. He was standing there in full view of Kakashi-sensei. What was he trying to accomplish? Yo, Sakura. She clapped her hand over her mouth to keep from yelping out loud. When had Naruto? Bunshin? No, they were both solid, no afterimage when they moved. So just what kind of technique was this, then? Sakura. I know how we can get the bells. But we need to work as a team. I'm talking to Sasuke right now, but we need to work together for this. What do you say? But there's only 2 bells. Come on, Sakura, you're meant to be smart, so think about it. Why would he expect us, fresh genin, to be able to snag bells from a jounin on our own? He wouldn't. So, it's actually another test entirely? He nodded, then stiffened as feedback reached him from his other clone. Damn. I should have guessed he'd force me to try this alone. Once I get a bell, meet me about 500 meters away east. He moved away, quietly as he could, before dispelling. Sakura watched as Naruto was shaking his head in front of Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi's face tilted up from his page. It was no great tragedy, nothing interesting was happening just yet. Is something wrong, Naruto? It's just that I got a stupid answer from someone, so now I'm gonna have to do something stupid to convince them. Oh? What kind of answer? Naruto's eyes glinted before he brought his hands together for the Kagebunshin seal. This one. Kagebunshin no Jutsu. 8 copies appeared and ran towards Kakashi. Oh? Kagebunshin? So he can use that, can he? Still, they shouldn't be much use. Numbers can overwhelm an opponent, but not like this. The Kagebunshin all surrounded him, but Kakashi wasn't worried. It was no problem at all. Okay then. Your first lesson from me, Shinobi Tactical Know-How Number 1 Taijutsu. Attack. The 8 copies leapt at Kakashi at the same time. Idiot. 8 at once are just going to get in the way, HM? He noticed the grins that suddenly appeared on the clones' faces. Okay, what is he planning in? Bunshin Daibakuha. Sure, Mat Dash. The clones all exploded in close proximity to Kakashi, while the real Naruto laughed. Didn't see that coming, did ya? He sniffed, then paused as the smoke cleared to reveal a patch now devoid of grass and Kakashi. He escaped looking around for any trace of Kakashi's location. He spotted a bell at the base of a nearby tree. Eh? A bell? Oh, please. Like this wasn't a trap. Naruto then reminded himself that he fell for said trap last time. He grinned. Okay, let's play along. He ran up to where the bell was sitting, while Sasuke was watching in astonishment. He just pulled a trick like that on a jounin, and now he's walking right into a trap. What the hell is wrong with this idiot? He must have been in a hurry if he dropped AB. The feeling of rope tightening against his ankles was immediately followed by the unsettling feeling of hanging upside down. Naruto crossed his arms as he bounced slightly on the rope. He'd sprung the first trap, which meant that any second now. That was very clever of you, Naruto. But they weren't close enough to hurt me when they exploded, and I was able to make use of their smokescreen to escape. He picked up the bell. Use your techniques only after thinking carefully. That's why it was used to your disadvantage. He dangled the bell just out of Naruto's reach. And don't fall for such an obvious trap, Baka. Naruto responded in an unexpected way. He grinned. Nez-sensei, what do you think is the fastest way to disarm a trap? Well, there's the textbook academy answer, but I assume you have a different opinion? Of course. The fastest way to disarm a trap. The Kagebunshin hanging from the tree disappeared in a puff of smoke, as Naruto leapt out of the bushes to the left, is to send a Kagebunshin to set it off first. The wide eye on his sensei's face was perfect. Kakashi's mind was putting things together even as he pulled his hand with the bell up and out of reach. He drew attention to one of his clones and made us think it was real, then used Daibakuha to explode all of his clones but that one while it acted as the ringleader, reinforcing the idea that it was the real Naruto. So when that Bunshin fell into the trap, I let my guard down, but how did he manage to hide from me in the first place? A quick jingle at his belt reminded him that he had more than one belt to steal, as Naruto's hand closed over the bell there and pulled it away. Even now that he's revealed himself, he's managed to keep his true objective hidden until it's achieved. Kakashi was stunned. This was the dead last? But he hadn't escaped with the bell just yet. Bell in hand, Naruto was still moving in midair in front of Kakashi, in easy reach. The jounin quickly caught him, but before he could retrieve the bell, Naruto twisted in his grasp, throwing the bell back into the bush he'd come from, before dispelling at close range to form an effective, if temporary, smokescreen. Another Kagebunshin. Kakashi looked up just in time to see 5 familiar orange jumpsuits dart into the foliage surrounding the clearing. More Kagebunshin as a distraction. I have a 1 in 5 chance of catching the real one if I do go chase them. Kakashi's eye narrowed as he felt Sasuke and Sakura pull away from the clearing as well. It seems I haven't been taking Naruto seriously enough. I've been treating him like a fresh genin, but that strategy was worthy of a seasoned chunin. It was an odd mix of pride and irritation that joined his next thought. I underestimated him. Sasuke was moving quickly towards the position Naruto had specified, seething. We need to work together to get a bell, he said. We don't stand a chance on our own, he said. Then he goes and pulls that. He dropped into a smaller clearing where an orange jumpsuit could be seen waiting. Oh, Sasuke. So you decided to see if my plan was worth anything after all. Sasuke was openly glaring at the blonde. What? We're only genin. We need to work as a team to snag a bell from a jounin. Sasuke's fists clenched. Liar. In case you didn't notice, I was working as a team. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, the one-man army. Naruto smiled, but that quickly faded. But that only worked because he underestimated me. He won't do it again. In fact, he grinned widely this time, his prankster's face in full force. My plan kinda counts on that. Sasuke's glare was gone, to be replaced by a confused look. What Naruto said about Kakashi underestimating him was true, and Sasuke had fallen into that trap as well. That Naruto could foresee that Kakashi would lay a trap and then have enough foresight to prepare his own counter-trap. Sasuke had not expected that level of planning from the dead last in the class. Both turned to face Sakura's approach at the same time. She arrived shortly after that, with a petulant look directed at Naruto. We need to work as a team, huh? Naruto sighed. Like I told Sasuke, that only worked because Kakashi-sensei underestimated me. It won't work again. In fact, I only tried that in the first place because I'm pretty sure that Sasuke Yaro wouldn't listen to me unless I had this. He pulled out the stolen bell and jingled it to remind them that, yes, he had a bell. Sasuke twitched at the sight of it, his right hand jerking towards his kunai pouch almost reflexively. If he beat Naruto here, he could obtain a bell and pass this test no matter what. But he couldn't say that he gained that bell with his own power. He would be no closer to killing Itachi if he abandoned his pride and resorted to petty thievery. Run away live in an unsightly manner. Sasuke shook his head vigorously. No. Stealing won't bring me the power I need to kill you. Well, Dobe, you said you had a plan? What is it? Yeah, I have a plan, but it's reliant on 3 things. First, we need to have good timing. We need to work together if this plan has a hope of succeeding. Can we do that? Sasuke looked at Sakura. His annoying fangirl, possibly chief among them. As far as he knew, she had few real combat-ready abilities. She was intelligent, if her scores were anything to go by. Sakura, for her part, wanted to immediately say yes. She could gladly work with Sasuke. She then met the Uchiha's gaze and realized that, no, she wasn't immediately able to say so. She would gladly follow his orders, but would she take his advice? His help? They then both looked to Naruto. The blonde, where previously unpredictable by way of his loud, trickster's personality, was now so by virtue of not knowing what hidden skill he would reveal next. That same unpredictability was a slight veil to his teammates. Could Naruto be trusted? Could he be trusted to trust them? They both nodded to themselves before all nodded to each other. The silent agreement in that small clearing was a seemingly small step, but it was a huge change from how they had used to be at this point. Sasuke was starting to open up, granting trust, and no small measure of it, to others. Sakura, aware of her own flaws and what she needed to do to correct them, and now taking her first step along the new path she had chosen for herself. Naruto knew this, and was proud of both his old friends for having that capacity to change so early. Second, Kakashi-sensei needs to be focused on me as the ringleader. He needs to identify me as the greatest threat, as someone to be taken out of the equation first. That was something from Shikamaru's helpful little tips on strategy. An obvious, lesser threat could hide a greater one. That this principle of direction was present in basic shinobi strategy, yet could be carried through to be applied to a campaign spanning years had been impressive enough for Naruto to take it to heart. And third, Sakura, do you know any techniques for distracting people? No. No, wait, she flushed pink. Yes, both teammates noticed this, but only Naruto mentioned it. What's wrong? Well, nothing, it's a genjutsu. What's wrong with genjutsu? Nothing, it's just that it's the name, is all. I just found it in a library scroll, and I thought it was a good technique, but the name you're going to think. Sakura. What's the genjutsu called? She told them. Sasuke smirked. Naruto grinned. Sakura, that's perfect. His grin faded as he launched into his explanation. Alright, here's my plan. Kakashi was on full guard back in the original clearing. The clock was in full view, and there were about 10 minutes remaining. The remaining bell jingled on his belt, lonely without its partner. Apart from Naruto's success earlier, they're taking their time getting the bells. He checked the clock once more. 8 minutes. I wonder if they're actually going to try it all. Pink petals were drifting across his field of vision. He felt relaxed too, at peace. All was right with the world, surely? He blinked, once, twice, a few times. The training ground changed into a wide, lush field, with a single, towering tree standing behind Kakashi. He looked up, to find that it was a sakura tree in full bloom, its petals drifting down to obscure his vision. Through the gentle haze of peaceful feelings, he recognized what was happening. Shinobi Tactical Know-How No. 2, Genjutsu. Haru no Sakura no Jutsu. Very fitting. So she's planning to sneak up and snag the bell while I'm under the genjutsu, any? Well, I think that's enough time to let her think I'm under. He brought his hand up in a lazy half-seal. Kai. The scene dissolved away, the petals disappearing last of all, only to reveal a triumphant blonde in orange, his hands set in the dragon seal. Futon, Kazurin no Jutsu. A fierce, chakra-laced whirlwind erupted around Kakashi, pinning him in place. The petals scattered rather quickly after that, though Kakashi did notice that the technique was fairly localized. No doubt intended to only catch one person. So, the genjutsu was only meant to give Naruto enough time to get close enough to use this technique. Wind prison technique. Adequately named. Kakashi could still move, but he couldn't take one step in any direction for sharp, chakra-laced wind. Still, even if he was trapped, the technique was a double-edged sword in this case. He couldn't leave the technique, but neither could anyone reach him through the cutting winds. Just what was this supposed to accomplish? Sasuke. Now, right. Kakashi turned his head to see Sasuke leaping out of the foliage behind him, his hands already blazing through seals. The thing was, though Kakashi recognized those seals, oh crap. Kakashi's mind was whirling even as his hands started moving through the seals for the ninjutsu he needed to escape. Basic chakra affinity reactions. Fire a Katon ninjutsu into a Futon ninjutsu, even if you aren't trying to achieve synchronization, and you get a big, nasty beefed-up Katon ninjutsu. Katon, Gakakyu no Jutsu. Sasuke landed, and the fireball flew forward to strike the localized squall. The effect was almost instantaneous as the flames, fanned by the wind, roared with sudden intensity and heat. The small whirlwind transformed into a hot, bright firestorm. Sasuke, barely 8 feet away, felt the need to shield his face from the heat, but only did so once he stopped feeding his chakra into the burning maelstrom. As the flames faded, Naruto slowly came into view on the other side. Did we get him? As the flames dissipated completely, the state of things where the combination technique had been was made apparent. The ground was still glowing faintly, but there was no sign of Kakashi or the bell. The only trace of any life was a small crater of glowing earth where Kakashi had been. The Jounin's disembodied voice echoed slightly over the training field. Shinobi Tactical Know-How Number 3, Ninjutsu. Naruto quickly realized what that meant. Crap. Both of you, fall back. Quick, Bakant, Doton, Shinjuzanshu. Kakashi's hands burst from the ground, wrapping around Naruto's ankles and pulling him into the ground even as Kakashi's technique propelled him upwards. In less than a second, Naruto was going to be buried up to his neck. Less than a second was all the time he needed though. Kaige Bunshin no Jutsu. A clone burst into existence to Kakashi's side, grabbing the bell while the Jounin's hands were occupied with sending the other Naruto underground. Kakashi quickly tested